Welcome in, everybody, to the second annual Moonlight Media Works Draft Show Extravaganza. I'm your host, Collins Janis, and we are all set to go here from our outside of Charlotte studios in North Carolina here as we bring you the picks and reaction tonight of all the happenings of the draft here as we see the favorite college football players find their future destinations for the NFL and the pro level. We're so welcome to have everybody here tonight and get a chance to break down all that's going to happen here and some of the moves and machinations of this draft this year. A lot of discussion coming into it, but before we get too far down the road, I would like to start by passing along our condolences. Just yesterday, we found out that the legendary defensive lineman for the Chicago Bears, the 85 Bears, Steve Mongo McMichael, as he was as affectionately known as, lost his 4-year battle with ALS. NFL Hall of Famer. And to put it bluntly, Steve McMichael is what we love about pro athletes, what we love about an NFL player, a pro wrestler in another life there as well. Steve McMichael was beloved by Bears fans, his family, and fans for so many years. And again, to lose a giant, a huge figure in the city of Chicago, and especially in Bears lore and in NFL lore, the 85 Bears, doesn't need to be said, share a large portion of the NFL lore to them and that team under Mike Ditka. So we do want to pass along our condolences to McMichael's family and his friends and all the fans that watched him for so many years, whether it was in the NFL or in pro wrestling and WCW. A terrible loss for the game, but I know he is watching down, maybe a little bothered that this draft is taking place in Green Bay, but as a Bear for life there, he left such an impact on the game. We will honor that tonight with what we do here and the respective futures of these NFL players. McMichael, a draft pick out of Texas. There will probably be a number of those names called tonight from the University of Texas, as well as several other schools that are going to have a high representation this year as far as their draft stock's concerned. We'll see plenty of players coming from Michigan. The Wolverines, just a year off removed from their national title, have a lot of prospects that we'll be talking about tonight, starting at the top with guys like Will Johnson. You're also going to see names like go throughout the draft, like Colston Loveland, a tight end, who'll come a little bit later. Could end up in the lap of his former head coach, Jim Harbaugh. A lot of stories to break down. Obviously, the key to this, though, is everything starts at the top with the first pick, obviously going to be with the Tennessee Titans and their search for their franchise quarterback. A lot of discussion coming into this draft before we got into the later months was, okay, you have the top pick. Who's the quarterback? Who do you like more? Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. Now we've even seen late discussions of Jackson Dart working his way into the first round, and we'll get into that a little bit later on when we break down the final mock that Moonlight Media Works was able to put out together. We pulled 3 drafts together and made this one, and we're pretty interested to see how this all breaks out tonight. But it starts at the top with what we assume the Tennessee Titans will be doing, which is drafting Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami. Spent his college career both Incarnate World and Washington State before he got to Miami. Had a great season last year. Led a major offensive resurgence in the Hurricanes attack and had them primed and in the hunt for a playoff spot for much of the season until the later end of the year. And a loss to Syracuse kept them out of the playoff ultimately. But nonetheless, a major prospect. And a lot of guys have talked about who they like more, whether they like the raw athleticism of a guy like Ward or the accuracy and, multiple years of starting and program like Colorado for Shedeur Sanders under his head coach father, Deion Sanders. It's going to be a topic of discussion whether anybody likes it or not. If you're not a fan of Colorado, you're going to hear a lot about them tonight. Just going to let you know that right now. If you are a fan and you're interested to see all this, you're going to hear some players called in the first round. I would suspect at least 2, and that would be Shedeur Sanders and the number 1 consensus draft pick prospect in this entire class in Travis Hunter. Both ways, playing defensively and offensively at cornerback and wide receiver. Hunter brings a lot to the table as far as that is concerned, but it'll be interesting to see where it all shakes out and who ends up taking these players. We'll give you a chance to look here at our big board for just a second. The Moonlight Media Works final mock draft there, assisted by our friends over at PFF. And if you can see the board, if you can't, I apologize, the technical difficulties. Cam Ward's at the top of our board. Travis Hunter to the Browns at number 2. Seems like it's not the greatest fit for what the Browns have as far as problems they need to counteract, but it is going to solve a couple problems with one stone. That's the beauty of a guy like Travis Hunter, which we haven't really seen from a major prospect going in the draft at any point in the last couple of years. A guy that can really play both ways at a high level. We started to see it out of New England with a guy like Marcus Jones, a cornerback out of Houston, who ended up working out really well as an offensive player for the New England Patriots in a live capacity as well. So a lot to enjoy there and break down as well. But then we get to what I think is ultimately the hinge point of this NFL draft, which is the pick at number 3 that is held by the New York Giants. And that is right now what we projected out to be Abdul Carter. Now, here's where this gets interesting. There's a lot of people on edge in New York right now between Joe Schoen, the GM, and Brian Daboll, the head coach. There's been rumblings as of late that they're still considering going with a quarterback at 3. Now, who that quarterback might be is anybody's conjecture right now. If we're asking me about a month ago, I would have thought this was Shedeur Sanders at 3. Maybe, maybe not. We will see if it's in fact Jackson Dart, who I had projected going back later on to 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers later on in the first round. Obviously a need there for them as well. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not they decide to go with Carter, who is the edge rusher out of Penn State. High motor, big prospect, mocks very easily to a guy that we see in the NFL every Sunday with the Dallas Cowboys and Micah Parsons. Hate to, paint with such a broad brush like that, but that's the fact of the matter. He's a high production defensive end. He's immediately going to upset the apple cart on the offensive line of any team you're about to play. And it makes it a real plug-and-play guy. And there aren't too many of those in this draft. That's the thing we've talked a lot about in the lead-up to. Usually we're saying there's somewhere between 10 to 15 guys that are immediate number 1 picks, number 1 first-round picks. The reality of it is this. After that, traditionally, are guys that most teams value as graded out to a low 1 or even a 2. So really, most years, once you get past pick 15, none of these guys are coming at a premium for a lot of the teams drafting in those positions. While it's usually 10, the number or usually 15, the number's closer to 10, maybe even 8 or 9 this year, where it's can't miss guys that are, on the boards of these respective war rooms as guys that they value at this percentage. And every pick comes with a, numerical value, a database that they can create and kind of work with throughout the year to try to figure out how they value this player at this position at this pick. All that comes into play when we're talking about first-round talent. And then you look at number 4, and that's the New England Patriots. The Patriots have the option to follow the Giants here, or if the Giants decide to move back, see what they do. Now, there's been a lot of speculation with this pick as well. Do the Patriots go ahead and get an offensive tackle, a left tackle to block the blind side of their quarterback they drafted first round last year, Drake May? Or do they decide to try to let the board come to them? If Abdul Carter is sitting there at 4, do you take Abdul Carter? I would think, in my mind, you would have to go ahead and make that move. If Abdul Carter's off the board, like we suspect he will be at 3, then did that mean Travis Hunter slipped any? Did that mean, we want to move back because we think we can get Will Campbell later on, move down a little bit, inquire a little bit more capital for the second round maybe as well? There's a lot of factors at play, and it hinges at 3, and the Patriots have to kind of watch that, knowing full well they're going to be listening to people, trying to offer them trade opportunities to move back, move up, and get the player that some of these other teams are going to be vying for in the background of this first round, and see if they want to move up to 4 and get that player. Or if New England holds steady and say, this is what we're going to do, this is who we see. There's even been talk of Jalen Walker, the linebacker out of Georgia, some other prospects as well. There's some great offensive talent in this first round. It's a matter of where the Patriots assess their value is and what they need to, do the most of. They did a lot of work in the offseason, spent the most money of any free agent class this offseason, improving that offensive line with, plug and play veterans. And now it's just a matter of figuring out how best to set up Drake May. Is it addressing the defense? Is it continuing to add receivers and other skill positions for him to work with? That will probably, regardless of what they do at 4, That's what they're going to have to do throughout this entire draft process. They're going to have to add, and they're going to have to keep building around those players that they have already drafted and some of the players they've acquired in the offseason. Then it gets interesting because after 4, you can see a lot of teams that are interested in possibly shaking up the apple cart, so to speak. Whether it's Jacksonville at 5, we're projecting them out to take Mason Graham, the first player off the board for the Wolverines, and what could be a 3 or 4 player first round for the Wolverines. Defensive lineman there that could add and bolster and help a defense that needs it in Jacksonville. Or did they decide to move around and somebody wants to get aggressive and go after possibly a Jackson Dart or a guy like Ashton Jeanty, who we have projected at number 6 to the Las Vegas Raiders? There's Teteroa McMillan as well, the wide receiver out of Arizona. He'll be an interesting prospect. We have him. We had this draft board set up with no trades and no options there as far as that was concerned. We decided to keep it bone stock, keep it as the draft order exists right now. So it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward from there. So give us just 1 second as we get ready here for the start of the first round. We'll go ahead and break down the rest of our board real quick once we do. And we will go from there as we are just shy of 8 p.m. here on the East Coast. So everybody, thank you for joining us. We are live on both Facebook and on YouTube tonight, the first official live post for the Moonlight Media Works YouTube channel. If you aren't already subscribed, please go do so. It definitely helps us out as well on Facebook. And we'll be cutting in periodically throughout the night on Instagram as well and Twitter to give everybody updates as to what is going on with each of their respective teams. Everybody. We give a chance here for everybody to catch back up and try to work their way into the lobbies here. If you guys have a comment or question, we'll be happy to take them here tonight and work with you live here as we are both live on YouTube and on our Facebook page here as well. So everybody check those out and give us a chance to try some stuff out here. It's a real kind of sprouting moment for the channel and everybody here at Moonlight Media Works. So we're really happy you're able to join us here tonight and work with us as we get through this live stream event. We're going to give you the reaction, the breakdown of what's going to happen here, where these teams evaluate and where we think these picks will ultimately help or hurt these teams. And, we had some real surprises last year. And we went back and looked at the first round of the 2024 class. Immediately, the one that jumped out to everybody was the Atlanta Falcons drafting Michael Penix Jr. To become the quarterback when they had already, in fact, grabbed Kirk Cousins to fill that role. And ultimately, at the end of the year, we saw those two make the switch. So there will be some surprises here tonight. It will be interesting to see who it is. In fact, I imagine it's going to be a team that's in the hunt for maybe a quarterback or even a top offensive skill position that we could see make a big jump tonight and try to go for one of these premier talents at the top of the board. Like I said, beyond 10, it gets really interesting where you value what on the board. We've talked about a lot of offensive line needs. There's a lot of good left tackles, a lot less of first round grades on guards and some of the other positions, the interior lines. There's not a lot of centers that are rated as a first round grade from any of these players. So it'll be interesting to see whether a team, sits in the first round and decides whether or not they're going to stay packed with what they have, decide to move back, acquire, picks later on, maybe even see some player swaps. We've seen it in the past. There's been some rumblings about some teams that are interested in making a move and using real NFL ready starters to make that move up in the draft board. Let's go through a couple real quick before we get the start of the first round of the NFL draft live here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And one of the great things that's been happening in recent years has been the draft being live in different locations. Obviously, we've seen it so many years in New York City, but we've seen The locations take place like Nashville a couple years ago was a big hit. Green Bay, obviously, this year, packing them out. Las Vegas in years prior as well. It's been great to see these NFL communities get to host these drafts and really showcase out. And there's been a great group of players that have decided to make their attendance known in Green Bay this year and show up for the physical draft as opposed to having the host site draft parties at their homes and a lot of those other things. So it's just after 8 o'clock here, and we will get ready as the Tennessee Titans will go on the clock with their 15 minutes and go make the decision that will start the chain process of the rest of this draft. Breaking down some of the other picks real quick, we go past 7. We look at another team that has really interesting options here. It's the Carolina Panthers at 8. Obviously saw Bryce Young take a development jump last season after what was a rocky start to a new head coach and a new a whole new setup for that organization. They think they now have the QB of the future. They think they have the guy in Bryce Young. So now it's a question of facilitating the rest of the team to try to match and elevate that already existing talent there. Once they can do that, it's, we're going to work from there and see where they wind up addressing what needs. I think right now, the best case scenario for the Carolina Panthers would be, in fact, to trade back. And I know that's been a very common opinion held by a lot of Panthers fans and other folks across that timeline to see what exactly they would want to do as far as that goes. I think if they stay pat at 8, Walter Nolan, a defensive lineman out of Ole Miss, sits to be a great pick as well. We could see them address the secondary. That's another thing. I think the biggest thing, if you're going to address the defensive side of the ball for the Carolina Panthers, it needs to start with the run game. Start up front. You could go either defensive line, or you could look at a guy like Jalen Walker. He's an interesting player out of Georgia, linebacker there, could work in a 3-4 or as a Mike situation there on some of these different defensive schemes. Has a lot of unique opportunities to try to make plays in the middle of the field for a team. And, we could peg him out to be a Panther. You could work his way down to even some of the teams just in the teens in there, like the Falcons, Cardinals, Bengals. I have him projected at 17 to the Cincinnati Bengals, addressing some big needs they're going to have with some of the losses they've experienced over the last couple of years, and it's kept them out of the playoffs in a very tight and contested AFC North. So going back to 9, this is where I think the possible landing spot, if it's not 3 for Shedeur Sanders, I think the New Orleans Saints could get in. Rookie head coach, but a QB in an offensive mind for many years now in the game. Kellen Moore getting his first chance as a head coach, having the opportunity to select his quarterback of the future. There's a lot of uncertainty right now about what's happening with Derek Carr. And if Derek Carr's hurt, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the relatively thin QB room in New Orleans. Right now, Spencer Rattler's still sitting in that room. But again, maybe this is the chance they see to go ahead and get the guy they can plug in and play there for the next 10 years. And I certainly think it would be somebody that would fit well in New Orleans with Shedeur Sanders. We look at 10 there. That's the Chicago Bears. Saw some great improvements in the offensive line through the free agent process this year. Obviously, Caleb Williams, second-year starter coming back here. He's got, some weapons on the outside of the offense. So you don't think you're going to look for skill position there on the offensive side. Now you look at defense. Malachi Starks, guy we put there at 10 on our board. It breaks down interestingly because obviously they've had some losses in the secondary over the last couple of years. This is a guy, multi-year starter at Georgia, get a chance to plug him in at safety and, kind of take care of the back half of your secondary. I think that's something that a lot of teams would like to address, and Starks is going to be a hot prospect as far as defensive backs go here in this first round. And I would imagine we're going to see him called earlier as opposed to later on in the first. Go to the 49ers and Cowboys. You're, again, adjusting the edges of both sides, whether it be the offensive line or the defensive line. Both sides need work there for both teams. Armand Membu out of Missouri is a huge tackle. There's some really interesting tackles in this first round. We talked a little bit about Will Campbell. I know the discussion about his arm length has been a big discussion, and a lot of criticism has come from that. But a multi-year starter at LSU, protecting the blind side down there in that offense. Another opportunity there to look for another guy is also sitting just below Membu on our board, which is, in fact, Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas, another big premier offensive line talent that spent the last couple of years in the SEC, or the last year in the SEC, as well as some great opponents that Texas plays each and every season. Great experience, plug-in guy. You could work him even to the other side of the field if you wanted to, but obviously if you're drafting for a tackle, most of the time in this first round, you're going to be looking for a left tackle. Some of the other players that we're going to see, some of the more fun options in every mock draft we've done so far this year, Tyler Warren to the Colts made the most sense. And we suspect that if Tyler Warren is in fact not taken before 14, he is a lock to go to the Indianapolis Colts. If they don't get Tyler Warren, that means possibly a team like the Jets, maybe even the Panthers, stepped up and grabbed Tyler Warren off the board from Penn State. I think it's a perfect fit as far as what the Colts are trying to accomplish, trying to give options to whoever's going to be the quarterback of the future. If it's Anthony Richardson, which we're not 100% sold as far as what we saw from last season, and neither are the Indianapolis Colts, you got to start giving them options. Safety blanket, big play tight end, Tyler Warren stepped up big in the postseason run that the Penn State Nittany Lions had this year. Definitely a targeted option, somebody that they could immediately help out whoever's playing quarterback for the Colts. The Falcons, another team that have a real interesting situation here as far as what they could address here in the first round. We have them taking a linebacker, possibly Jihad Campbell out of Alabama. That would also include a class of guys that we could look at, like Jalen Walker as well. It's open-ended as of right now. The other possibility we could see is them addressing the wide receiver room in Atlanta. Obviously, Drake London, number one wideout for the Falcons, but with Michael Penix now in at quarterback and the guy that's going to lead the charge here for the Falcons going forward under head coach Raheem Morris, think maybe go ahead and get somebody to try to help him out. Maybe go and get a Luther Burden, wide receiver out of Missouri. He's had some big opportunities to play in an interesting, fast-paced offense they have out in Missouri under Eli Drinkwitz. So it's interesting to see if they decide to go that route. There's other wide receivers we're going to talk about later on that'll come up in the later first round. We're going to Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State, Matthew Golden out of Texas. There's some other names that'll even show up sneaking their way into the first round. We don't have graded as a first round talent, but it's ultimately going to come down to scheme fit and where these teams go. And the Tennessee Titans are on the clock now with their 10 minutes. I don't know why we said 15 minutes earlier. It's 10 minutes on the clock for the Tennessee Titans. We can't imagine this is going to take long, but of course, due to the powers of drama and the NFL draft, they will drag this pick out for as long as possible. So we will keep an eye on that and see where, in fact, the the Tennessee Titans look to go with the first pick of the NFL draft. A lot of talk about Cam Ward and his maturity levels. And again, both quarterbacks have been dealt with a lot of unfair and unjust discussions about maturity and, just their understanding of where they were as college players versus where they're going to be as NFL players. I think a lot of criticism is levied at both guys for both their NIL and dalliances away from just playing the position of quarterback. And, at the end of the day, that's an unfair criticism for some, and it's a justified criticism for others. Ultimately, these teams have spent months working through their boards, working through, the entire process of what they're going to see from these guys in that, interview process, whether it's professional workouts, pro days. They've had chances to go through and do their homework. This is like deep level stuff. Some teams do it better than others. Don't get me wrong. We've seen plenty of teams butcher this process over the years and ultimately backfire and hurt them in the long run. So it's a matter of finding the guy that fits both what you're trying to accomplish and the skill set that matches the side of the ball they're going to address. I think Cam Ward brings a lot of athleticism to the quarterback position, has a great arm, proved it at different locations across college football over the last 4 or 5 years. And again, Davey O'Brien Award winner. It will not be a shock to anybody if it happens, and I don't think it's the wrong pick. I think maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I'd have said Shedeur over Cam Ward. But now you put all those pieces together. And again, we've also seen the Tennessee Titans go out and address some offensive concerns as well. Looking at Tyler Lockett going the way of the Titans as well. That's a wide receiver that could definitely help address some of the skill position concerns in Tennessee under Brian Callahan, second-year head coach, former coordinator with the Cincinnati Bengals. So, it's a matter of who you like more. I don't think it's 100% a guarantee that it's Ward, but if I was putting it right now, I would have to put it at least at 90% that from all intents and purposes, they are going to take Cam Ward with this first pick. As we get a chance to work out through here the first round and see what happens with regards to this. And again, this is also going to shake up what happens beyond the first 3 or 4 picks. I mean, this will have ripple implications that are going to be felt all the way through the mid 20s in this draft, because there are teams that are sitting in that position beyond the top 5, top 10 that are interested in possibly some of these quarterbacks. And we haven't even talked about the ones that could sneak their way into the first round outside of Jackson Dart. We think right now, if there was only 3, that would be following the consensus opinion about this first round. Now, it's not a guarantee that Jackson Dart works his way in. It's not even a guarantee as of now that Shedeur Sanders winds up as a top 15 pick. I mean, his number from a lot of different sports books has moved that projected over-under pick from as high as 9 down to immediately somewhere in the 20s in just a matter of days. And there's been some rumors about some leaked scouting reports about him as far as the personal interview and some of those things. And they always seem to come out at the last possible second. Now, sometimes that's a smokescreen to try to get better position to get a guy you like, because even if there is a report out there that says we didn't enjoy what we saw as far as the face-to-face interaction, or we didn't love what we saw on some of the tape, there's another team that desperately wants that, and they will gladly take any of the advantages they can to pick up a guy like that. If it means leaking a prospect, notification like that, then so be it. All's fair in love and war, I suppose, when it comes to the NFL draft. And we've seen a lot of different scenarios play out in the last couple of years as far as, manipulating the first round to try to get some of these guys. So we are 5 minutes away from the Titans clock expiring here, and it looks like they're going to take the full 10 minutes here to get this first pick in. There's a lot of comparisons to make for a guy like Cam Ward. Obviously, if you look back across the history of the Tennessee Titans, it's not entirely littered with great QB prospects. They were, in fact, drafting one a couple years ago in Will Levis that they quickly moved out of Tennessee there as well. So, go back to a guy like some of the other QB draft picks they've had in the past. Vince Young, a highly touted prospect out of Texas. In fact, they're going to lock the pick in. So with about 5 minutes left on their clock, the Titans have made their decision. They're, in fact, going to come to the podium and give us an idea as to what we see. Lock your picks in, folks. If you had them before, let's go ahead and lock them in. I believe this is Cam Ward. I believe 158 passing touchdowns, most by any QB in D1 history, getting the benefit of the extra years there as well. And a great story this would be if, in fact, Cam Ward is the first overall pick. A guy who started his college career at Incarnate World, made his way over to Washington State. That's where a lot of people really first got to see just what a player Cam Ward could be. I remember the great Apple Cup game a couple years ago, an absolute show that was on display between Penix and Cam Ward. And, the arm talent is there. The ability to make plays off script and out of order is very exciting for teams. And we're seeing more teams want to go that way with the players they draft at the quarterback position. The game is becoming far more athletic at that position than even once was believed. The days of the drop back, clean pocket passer are moving further and further away. And if your quarterback doesn't have the ability to make plays off script and out of time, it becomes a lot harder to set an offense in motion around it. Now, it doesn't say that, that's not to say that it doesn't exist, because there are more than enough teams that still utilize that basic structure that do it successfully. It's just becoming a far more hot commodity than even it was when the Tennessee Titans were able to get guys like Steve McNair, who is a real revolutionary player at the position, much in the same way and a lot of the same game we've seen out of Cam Ward in the years previous. And I know Tennessee Titans fans would love to see it as they decide the future of the franchise with this first overall pick. And we'll see what happens and who they decide to go with here to lead the charge in Nashville. New stadium coming there. A lot of buzz being built around this team. And in fact, it is going to be a quarterback. And it is Cam Ward, the first overall pick here for the Tennessee Titans. So there you go. Cam Ward comes in, immediately has years of starter experience at the college level, immediately going to be a guy that I would imagine is going to have to jump in and play early. You're not going to have this guy sitting around on the bench for many, many years. And now the Cleveland Browns are, in fact, on the clock with 7.5 minutes remaining as their clock started as the Titans turned the pick in. So 7.5 remain for the Browns at 2. But again, quickly, Cam Ward brings a lot of great athleticism. Oh, in fact, we are looking at possibly some developments here. The Cleveland Browns are making a move here. They're going to trade the second pick overall to Jacksonville. Our immediate first move of the draft here, folks. This is exciting. Now we're getting ready. We're seeing a little movement here across the top of the first round. So, in fact, the Jaguars have 6.5 minutes remaining with their first selection. Now they move up to 2. Does this mean the Cleveland Browns want to take a quarterback and are fine leaving Travis Hunter on the board? Now, that's a bold strategy. You have a pick that has a guy that can play both ways. Everybody agrees right now was the best player on the board. If you're moving back, Jacksonville, we have to imagine, is moving up to go ahead and grab him. I can't imagine this being anything else. They needed to address the wide receiver position. Obviously, that's the other big question that a lot of these teams that would be interested in having a guy like Travis Hunter are going to have to answer. Do you want to play him more as a cornerback, or do you want to have him as a wide receiver? Or are you going to split him 50-50? That means he's going to have a lower snap count on one side of the ball in one game and a higher snap count on the other side of the ball in another game. These are all the questions you have to have and have done your homework on before a guy like this goes off the board. And clearly, the Cleveland Browns are thinking, we're giving up the clear path to get him at 2. So either they're interested in making the move back to get somebody else, and they didn't want to burn their first round pick on a guy like that. Again, it'll be interesting. This is an interesting development here. We're going to see what, in fact, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Khan family owning the team there as well. They're in their draft room, their war room, trying to settle out this pick. They seem to be excited. It looks like right now, it looks like to be a pick swap that would send the Jaguars the second pick, and the Cleveland Browns would move back to 5. Now, this also is interesting because this could shake up what the New York Giants do. If this is Abdul Carter off the board, do the Giants immediately go grab Travis Hunter? Or do they possibly go, okay, we were dead set on Abdul Carter. Do we move back, or do we take a quarterback? When I say all the dominoes are between 2 and 3, that's what I meant, what we're talking about right now. This is where it's really interesting to see how this breaks out. And we'll see if we get any more information as to what, in fact, the fallout of this trade is as far as compensation. Right now, we would expect it's a straight up pick swap with probably a later round pick exchange in accordance with that. So let's see what happens here. Is there 4.5 minutes left on the clock here for the Jacksonville Jaguars and their new head coach, their rookie head coach, Liam Cohen, going to be the man in charge in Duval, as he famously said in his press conference. Actually, it was Duval, which I don't know who was advising him of that. That just did not look good on television. But I think he learned his lesson. And again, this is only the third on-the-clock trade between top 5 teams in the common NFL draft era. That's impressive to think about. Looks like, okay, here's the breakdown. It's the 2025 second overall pick for the 5th. A 4th and a 6th go to the Jaguars. A 4th, 2nd, and 1st in 2026 go to the Cleveland Browns. Wow. Quite a sizable shakeup. A 2nd and 4th in 25 for the Browns and a 2026 first-round pick. And the Jaguars receive also the 4th round pick and the 6th round pick this year. So that's a lot to take in. They're giving up a first rounder next year, as well as giving up the spot to move up. The Browns, you can kind of understand now why they decided to make this move back. Because they're going to sit at 5. And clearly they think that whoever they like, the pick is turned in now. So it's only a matter of time to see who will join Trevor Lawrence and company down in Jacksonville to see about the future of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Be very interesting to see what is in fact happening here in the war room in Duval County. A great crowd on hand in Green Bay, Wisconsin, just outside Lambeau Field, a historic site in the NFL, and a great opportunity for all these fans to get out there and support. A little chillier than it is down here in our beautiful North Carolina studios, the Moonlight Media Works studios, as we are nice and cozy here, waiting to see who will go off the board next. A lot of people, myself included, have to think this is Travis Hunter, 2024 Heisman Trophy winner, standout at both cornerback and wide receiver for the Colorado Buffaloes over the last couple years. Got his start with Deion Sanders as the number one prospect in all of high school football, the top coveted option for all the college football teams, and ended up following Deion Sanders and company. And now a chance to see where he winds up. And the War Room looks happy here in Duval County. So we'll see. And in fact, it is Travis Hunter. Goodness gracious, you could see this suit from outer space. Bright pink for Travis Hunter. As if everybody wasn't going to look at him already as the top prospect on the board. Now he's got the outfit to match. So great to see the players here in attendance at the actual event, in the green room, working in around, and a lot holds in the balance right here, folks. We were wondering when we were going to see our first surprise. It didn't take long. Pick number 2, Jacksonville on the clock. Their pick is turned in. Now it's a matter of the commissioner to come out with the card and tell us what, in fact, they decided to do, as we all wait with bated breath. Good turn of phrase there. As we wait the second pick of the first round of the NFL draft. I have to think this has got to be Travis Hunter. I'd be stunned if this is anybody but. Even if this is Abdul Carter, this seems like a stretch to try to trade up that much capital to get him. You only make this move if you have a guy that you cannot live with on your roster here. It looks like the commissioner is going to give way for the Walter Payton Man of the Year to give the pick here for the Jaguars. Let's see, in fact, if it is Travis Hunter. Eric Armstead, the 2024 Walter Payton Man of the Year out of Jacksonville. Former early round pick as well. So he's going to have the opportunity to tell everybody there in Green Bay and around the world who, in fact, the Jaguars have taken and moved up to get. But they're going to take their sweet, precious time working through this draft. So bear with us as we get this information after the fact. We will react to it, obviously. Follow along online or on ESPN or any of your favorite draft sites to watch it live and happen, and we'll give you our reaction here, as that's all we're allowed to do. Sit here, react, and break down what happened. It looks like the pick is finally going to be announced here as we await the first pick of the Jacksonville Jaguars draft. Second overall, it is in fact Travis Hunter. Cornerback, wide receiver, 2024 Heisman Trophy winner, goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay. 2 immediate needs addressed. Big play wide receiver for the offense, for Trevor Lawrence. It's been a mess there on the wide receiver side, between Calvin Ridley in the past working his way through there, between some of the players that we've seen come in and out of that wide receiver room. In fact, they've tried to patch this offensive skill set for a couple years now, and to me, this makes the most sense in the world. If you're going to go ahead and get a guy that's immediately going to make the impact that Travis Hunter is, you go up and get him. 2024 Bednarik, trophy winner, nation's best defensive player. Now the question becomes, do they use him? Where and how much on both sides? Because I imagine you make this pick because you want to play him on both sides of the ball. And the Giants are currently on the clock, so now they have about 4.5 minutes after a long delay there between picks. as Hunter goes off the board. We're also going to welcome in our Instagram live audiences as they're trying to check in with us here in just a moment. For the first time tonight, give us a chance to check in with our Instagram live audience as well. With 3:43 left on the clock here for the Giants. Again, this now it leaves you with some options here if you're the Giants. If you want it, do you go ahead and make the move for Abdul Carter? Do you trade back? I would imagine at this point they're going to stick with the pick. There's only 3 minutes left, unless, again, they decide to make a quick move. I would have to imagine this is a player you take here and you just set up and go from there because, again, there are a lot of needs to be addressed with the Giants going forward, but certainly one of them they need to address is the defensive side of the ball. This is a team that was not stopping much last season, was not scoring that many points either to boot. So they have a quarterback situation that's uncertain. They go ahead and grab both Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. So you imagine that for the foreseeable future right now, they're going to look at keeping who they have at the quarterback position, possibly drafting one later on as the future guy. But I don't think the long-term future of the Giants is on the roster. That could be addressed this year, could be addressed next year. It depends on how much faith you put in Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston to win out a battle and compete. Because let's face it, the last couple of years, you see the hated rival Philadelphia Eagles win another Super Bowl in a 10-year window. You have one playoff appearance under Brian Daboll, and you have a lot of questions and an abysmally bad, unwatchable, unfun season for your ticket holders. Let's call a spade a spade. It was not good as far as what the Giants put out on field just last season. So the Giants pick is in, and that will then give way to the Patriots at number 4. And you have to imagine a lot of what they want to do is going to be decided right here. If, in fact, Abdul Carter goes off the board, you have to imagine that option. If you're the Patriots, you have to come into this draft thinking Abdul Carter is going to be gone. He is not going to be there at 3. Unless you have heard it from some insider source, then immediately it goes back to where can we do the most immediate good, and that would be drafting an offensive lineman, particularly a left tackle, and I would be stunned if it's anybody other than Will Campbell. Again, the tape on Campbell has great footwork all over the board, multi-year starter in the SEC under both a Heisman Trophy winner and Jaden Daniels, Garrett Nussmeier as well. So it's not a concern to me about the tape and what this guy brings. Obviously, the measurables that everybody wants to work themselves up about, that's something that you have to deal with. But realistically, I don't think too many teams, if they're interested in getting a guy as good as him, are going to nitpick over arms. I think we saw even David Andrews, longtime center of the New England Patriots that just was released a couple months ago, make the decision to say, hey, look, the arm length is a nonsensical discussion. We don't need to bring it up all the time. If a guy can play, he can play. And that's what we've seen out of Hunter. Here we go. The Giants pick is in. Where do the New York Football Giants go? They make the selection, that we suspected they would. They're going to go edge rusher out of Penn State, Abdul Carter. Okay. So this is where they choose to address first. All right. So again, you see the team move up ahead of you. They go ahead and take Travis Hunter. You had to think that wasn't in the cards for you unless you were willing to move up to 2. And seeing what the Browns got paid to do it, it's understandable as to why they didn't make that move. But you go ahead and address a need. And again, unanimous All-American, tied for the most tackles for loss last season in FBS. I mean, guy's a defensive nightmare for teams. You're going to match this guy up on the end of the line against your best offensive lineman of the other team. And again, it's going to be a battle all game long, and he's going to work his way through there. And again, it's not to say there's nothing on this Giants defensive line that's going to complement what he does on the edge. It's just certainly that you're going to plug this guy in and be like, this is immediately going to change our defense for the better. And, Brian Daboll spent many years in a Belichick coaching tree, spent time with the Buffalo Bills. And I think a guy like this, from all the coaching staffs he's worked on, as well as some of the other organizations he's been a member with, he worked with Nick Saban as well. They would all sing the praises of a guy like this, an immediate defensive wrecker. And that's what Abdul Carter is. And again, the Giants have had a history of getting guys like this. We go back to Lawrence Taylor. They have had a long lineage of guys. Lawrence Taylor, you go back a little more recently, you go back to a guy like Michael Strahan, Osi Umenyiora. Big part of the Giants culture and a lot of what they've been able to do over the years successfully starts with getting pressure. And a guy like Carter jumps off the board, made a big presence felt in the playoffs this year, as well as all of Big Ten play for the Nittany Lions. And again, the obvious NFL comp is a guy like Micah Parsons. The difference is, I think the beauty of a guy like Carter is you can stand him up or you can put him down in a stance. You can move him to the middle of the field if you want to for certain situations where you want to spy, some of those other situations. He's got good ball skills, so it's not a matter of this guy's just an edge. He's going to sit there for 2 or 3 downs, and you're going to have to worry about something else. No, this guy's got a high motor, good sideline to sideline speed, and immediately a guy that's going to help complement what you already have on defense. You can move him around. He's got the versatility and the speed to get from sideline to sideline. So it's a great pick. There's no other way to say it. You can say maybe they needed to address certain other things in the process, but it's hard to argue with what we've seen. State. So now the New England Patriots are on the board here. And we'll see if they, in fact, decide to go with an offensive lineman in the presence of Will Campbell, or they decide to go somewhere else, decide to move back, although we don't have the clock up right now to see how much time they actually have left on their pick here. So we'll get that to you once we do. Chance for us to take a breath here as the first 3 picks have come in, and it's taken us about 30 minutes to get through 3. So buckle in, folks. If you got a beverage of choice, have it with you. Get the dip out, the chips out, everything out. It's going to be a long night. We'll be here with you to cover the entire first round here on Moonlight Media Works. Thank you all for checking in on our YouTube and social media accounts. We appreciate it. This is always a big night for us. Put on our Sunday bests and get ready to break down what all happens here in the first round. There will be, I think, a little bit of a delay here between the first pick or the third pick and the fourth pick here. Again, if we go look back at the big board, we can give you get a chance to break some of this down and see what, in fact, because this will ultimately impact, too, where the offensive line market goes for the rest of this draft. If, in fact, they choose to go with an offensive line, they're going to get their choice of any of the offensive tackles in the first round, as well as if they decide to go another direction, that's going to shake up the apple cart as far as whether they go ahead and add a wide receiver. We haven't talked about it yet for the Patriots. They've added some in the offseason. They went ahead and made some moves on that side of the ball to get a guy in Stephon Diggs. Now, he's coming off an injury with the Houston Texans, but when he played, he was a nice complimentary 1-2 wide receiver for the Houston Texans. The Patriots have been severely lacking for the last 3-4 years in New England of skill position players. They have guys like Kendrick Bourne. They have guys like Hunter Henry. They've got a lot of unproven young talent, Jalen Polk and, Kayshon Boutte. And, there's some other names there that you can work your way through. Javon Baker, that they went ahead and drafted. Do they decide they really want to get a premier one talent and go get a guy like Tetairoa McMillan? Or do they wait and address that later on in the draft? I would figure right now, if I'm the Patriots, I'm Mike Vrabel, new head coach in New England, I'm addressing the offensive line. It's been a part of what made him so successful in Tennessee as a head coach, was running the ball and getting balance there and protecting the left side of the offense. There were great offensive linemen there. Brent Jones, you've got Taylor Lewan, guys that have been stalwarts on that Tennessee line for so many years that have worked their way through the NFL and now are retired. But major part of what made that Tennessee Titans team, a team that could have been a Super Bowl contender for many years under Vrabel and just missed out on the big game a couple times. If you're a Patriots fan, this has to excite you, what they've gone ahead and done in the offseason. They've addressed a lot of the defensive needs, whether it was getting Milton Williams fresh off a Super Bowl win with the Eagles, Robert Spillane, linebacker out of the Las Vegas Raiders, Carlton Davis, a big corner to put in and plug in and play off the other side away from Christian Gonzalez. So there's a lot to like there with what you've already addressed on that side. You've also got Mack Hollins, who spent many seasons there in Buffalo, being a big 2 or 3 option in a Buffalo passing game. So you're getting guys for Drake May. Now it's time to protect him. Where you're going to run into the situation the Cincinnati Bengals have had to work through over the last couple seasons, which is putting the cart before the horse. You go ahead and get Joe Burrow. You had to do that. He's a top 3 quarterback when healthy. Problem is, a guy like Joe Burrow, for all his might and all his skill set and all his game, has had trouble staying on the field because they weren't able to protect him. The Cincinnati Bengals finally made those adjustments, and now they look to try to put themselves in a better position to make the playoffs next year. The Patriots have a chance to jump up a lot as far as what they've already added as far as offensive linemen that are going to be veterans that you're going to plug in and play. To me, with the addition of some of those guys, maybe you don't think you have to stretch on, get as many offensive linemen, but if you're going to get one, might as well use your first pick to get the best one on the board. To me, that's Will Campbell. Gave up 3 sacks across his entire college football career at LSU. Pick is in, and we shall see which way Mike Vrabel, Elliott Wolf, and the entire war room for the New England Patriots decides to do. Parted ways with Gerard Mayo at the end of last season, hired Mike Vrabel after he spent a year off. And in fact, it is Will Campbell. So the Patriots go ahead and take their left tackle of the future right here. And they decide to go and make the move to get Will Campbell off the board. Okay. I have to say I like this move. I really do. There were a lot of directions this pick could have gone. But I think in the closing weeks, it really circled around one. You had to think Will Campbell was going to be the guy based off the way the board broke out above them and based off of what they needed to address. 6'5", 319, great footwork for an offensive lineman, protected Garrett Nussmeier's back left side for the last 2 seasons there in LSU. Great hands. That's another thing that I said. We talk about the arms and the arm length with Will Campbell. He's got great hands. And again, you're going to plug him in. And there's been questions. Do you move a guy like that into maybe a guard position because you're scared of his arm length and his ability to match up with some of these bigger defensive linemen that you're going to get? Honestly, I would sit him right there on the left side because you're not going to find a more athletic left tackle in this draft. Can get out there, make some moves downfield. And again, that's another area the Patriots are going to have to address as well, the running game. Ramondre Stevenson's currently in the backfield there. You've got some other options as well. And wouldn't be surprising to see the Patriots go ahead and make a move later on, maybe in the early 2nd or 3rd round, if they want to address the running back position. We'll talk a little bit later on, but obviously Ashton Jeanty won't be there. But that doesn't mean a guy like Amarion Hampton out of North Carolina won't be. There's some interesting choices there. Cam Scadaboo out of Arizona State. That's another guy we will talk about, could work his way back into the first round. But the Patriots go with a left tackle, and the green pinstripe suit is a heck of a choice there for the big man out of LSU. I like it. You got to love it. They're showing out in all their draft night apparel there in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It is just after 8:40 p.m. here. Thank you all for tuning in and watching along as we break down all the fun here of the second annual Moonlight Media Works Draft Show Extravaganza live reaction here on Facebook, YouTube, and again, a lot of storylines to watch throughout the night. Well, now we see what, in fact, the Cleveland Browns want to do. They move back to 5. And this is originally where we had Mason Graham slated out to go. So it's a matter of, do the Cleveland Browns want that, or are they interested in maybe getting a quarterback at 5? There's been a lot of talk about that. So let's address that. Browns QB situation right now, not good. Dorian Thompson-Green started a majority of the games at the end of the season last year. Deshaun Watson's been hurt, possibly hurt longer term than we think right now. Jameis Winston leaves the QB room. He moves up to New York. If you're a Browns fan, you can't be happy with what you have at the quarterback position. It's a matter of, do you think you can wait and trade back into a first for Shedeur? Or do you go ahead and grab him here? Or do you go somewhere else? Do you go get a Mason Graham? Do you go get a Walter Nolan? Maybe a guy like Jalen Walker you're excited about. There's a lot of needs on this Cleveland Brown team. And let's see if, in fact, they decide to address quarterback or they decide to go defensive line. Because maybe they were higher on a guy like Abdul Carter. They had some of these guys labeled a little higher. Once those guys were going to go where they go. But clearly they saw the second pick. They got enough calls and they said, okay, what we need, we can get later. We can get it at 5. We don't need to burn our 2 on it. Let's go ahead and give somebody the chance to go get what they want. There's risk in doing this. There is. Because if you trade it out of the spot and Travis Hunter turns out to be great and your pick at 5 fails, your entire GM and coaching staff for Kevin Stefanski and the likes are going to be hearing about it for years to come. A lot of teams and staffs don't survive that move. But if, in fact, this is the guy you think you're locked in on and there's a complete trust in the room, if this is the guy we want, let's go get him, then by all means, go move back, acquire some capital. And again, it's hard to turn down what the Jaguars offered, a first rounder in 26 for the pick swap and, the moves they make in the later rounds. So a lot of questions will be answered right here at 5. Thought we were going to be done at 3 with most of our questions because we kind of figured once 3 went down, everything would start to fall into order. But with the Browns making the move from 2 to 5, shakes up the situation there. As their pick is in, that means the Las Vegas Raiders are on the board. We'll talk about them in a moment here after we get the pick on the Cleveland Browns side of things. The Raiders are in an interesting position too. New head coach, new ownership group involved with the Raiders and the football team there. And it looks like the Cleveland Browns are going to go Mason Graham. Okay, so far we are 4 for 4 in what we have, or 5 for 5, with what we have mocked out on our big board here. So, in fact, Ward, Hunter, Carter, Campbell, Graham off the board. Now, we didn't obviously account for the trades, but we knew some teams were going to be frisky, want to make some moves. But Mason Graham, a defensive lineman with a championship pedigree, spent his time at Michigan under Jim Harbaugh, and Sharon Moore at Michigan, 6'3", 296. Another tackle here. And, there's going to be some tackles we're going to talk about a little while later. Mason Graham, to me, led this class. He was just ahead of Walter Nolan, who I have slated going in the top 10 as well. But great off pressure here, good up the middle. Again, a defensive tackle that has good speed for his size and good blocking, shedding ability. And again, has proven it against some premier talent in the Big Ten. Gets to the edge very well for a defensive tackle. You can stand him up too off of out of a stance, and he'll be, and don't get it twisted, he's not beating everybody just by getting to the edge and getting his hands out in front. He can bull rush guys and move them out of the way as well. So there's a lot to like in Mason Graham if you're the Cleveland Browns. So again, we thought they'd address defensive line. They lock up Myles Garrett after Myles Garrett says, I don't know that I want to be here. I want to be where I can compete. Money makes that story a little bit easier to swallow if you're Myles Garrett. So they go ahead and pair him up now with Mason Graham, who's going to slot in just inside on that defensive tackle, probably line him up right alongside Garrett. I liked the pick overall. To judge this Browns class is going to be what they do with the rest of their picks. Because obviously you move back. Travis Hunter goes at 2. You don't feel you need to get a wide receiver cornerback this high. Okay. You go ahead and get an immediate part to the offensive line, or the defensive line. We're just now getting a chance to see. We've got some comments here that I haven't even had a chance to look at. Thank you guys for making the time to do that. Let's see. I'll see if I can address some of these questions. Adam here has a question who he thinks we have taking, the Lions taking a little later on. Right now, it'll be interesting. To me, I have them taking at 28, staying put. They'll take Trey Amos, a corner out of Ole Miss. Now, here's the thing. The cornerback depth chart this year in this draft is interesting because I have at 32 Siobhan Revell, the cornerback out of East Carolina, coming off an injury there. I have him as the second best corner on my board, but I understand that the injury concern is going to scare some teams off. I think the Philadelphia Eagles will have the ability to, take that risk at 32, whereas maybe the Lions, a couple other teams we'll talk about later on, they're going to look at it like the Falcons, possibly the Arizona Cardinals, maybe don't want to take that chance. That's why I have corners ahead of him on our big board here. Does not mean I think they're a better player. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 cornerbacks in this first round that I think are immediate guys that are going to step up and make big plays. I love Revell, but I don't think he goes that high. I think right now Trey Amos fits in a great spot for possibly the Lions. The other thing is they could go wide receiver, and that's going to depend on what breaks out in front of them. I know that's, an interesting question because right now we haven't seen one come off the board. McMillan's sitting there right now. We suspect he will be the first corner off the board, the first wide receiver off the board. But beyond that, it's anybody's guess. It's ultimately coming down to fit. You've got guys like Luther Burden III. You've got Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden. These are guys that, do you like size? Do you like the go ball possibility? Do you like, speedster that's going to create separation? Here comes the pick from the Raiders. We had this projected as Ashton Jeanty here. Geno Smith, now the quarterback there in Las Vegas. And it is, in fact, Ashton Jeanty here. Running back out of Boise State. Okay, so here we go. This is interesting. We've seen a resurgence so far in the running back valuation amongst teams, starting with Adams Lions. We saw it a couple years ago where they went ahead and get Jahmyr Gibbs, an immediate impact that's made. We've seen what the Philadelphia Eagles did with Saquon Barkley and going in and making that trade. It brought them to the Super Bowl and helped them win that Super Bowl over the Chiefs. So again, running backs are coming back in style. 5'8.5", 211. Runner up for the Heisman Trophy. A lot of people had him pegged as the Heisman Trophy winner. Just great speed, breaking tackle combination. And again, the immediate criticism I've seen so often is, the quality of play that a team like Boise State saw during the last season. And I think this is a position that I have a lot less concern about going forward with the quality of opponent they played. Running back translates. It really does. And again, the Raiders have got work to do because Colton Miller, their main offensive lineman, is having some disagreements with the staff there and such. And we'll see if they end up making a move to move him out in this draft or not, or if they're going to stay with him and try to build around it. This was an abysmal running back room. Zamir White was your number one going into last season. That can't happen again, and the Raiders know that. They also know that this is immediately a guy that you're going to put up on a billboard in downtown Las Vegas, a city loving their star athletes, loving the opportunity to host all these things, but you need a star in Las Vegas. This is immediately a guy that's going to put butts in seats, and he's going to immediately make that offense better. Because Geno Smith's going to hold it down at quarterback. You know what you get with Geno Smith. To answer your question, Adam, do I think the Lions need a quarterback? You lost Carlton Davis, so it's addressing the need. You can obviously Arnold's decent, but the secondary itself did need help at the last season. And again, it's maybe not the biggest priority need, but it's certainly a position of need that you can address here with a high-end talent, or you can decide to wait on. Again, if you want to wait to the second round, you can move up and try to get some of the guys that fall out of the cracks there. It's an odd spot. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Lions even trade back out of it and go into the second round and try to let somebody move up. Maybe a team like the Browns, maybe another team that we've already talked about, like the Giants, maybe they move to 28 to move a second rounder up into the first, make a swap there. It wouldn't shock me. I think they're in a very interesting position at 28. Or you could go ahead and get a guy like Nick Scourton, edge rusher out of Texas A&M, Shamar Stewart. There's guys there. It's ultimately going to be how the board breaks out in front of them. And I think that's the biggest thing. Because ultimately the depth is what cost the Lions last season in the playoffs. And again, I don't think there was a more defensively injured team going into the postseason last year than the Lions. It really shook up what was a promising season for everybody there in Detroit. All right, so we are 6 for 6 right now. I wish we did as well as I wish we did that well last year. So far, we're off to a hot start, but let's look at the board. It's the Jets pick now. Oh boy, okay. Where did the New York Jets go? Quite a chaotic year for the Jets. The Aaron Rodgers experiment, over. The Davante Adams experience has probably run its course as well, and that's not going to be something anybody wants to look back on with fond memories. So do you go ahead and start filling in offensive skill positions and bear somebody up with Garrett Wilson? Because now you have Justin Fields. You go ahead and grab Fields off the free agent market. That was kind of not a spot I anticipated seeing land a guy like Justin Fields, but he's just a couple years removed from being a first-round pick in his own right. I think in the right setting, a guy like Justin Fields can do that. He did well in Pittsburgh last season before the injuries started to crop up and, some of the other situations they decided to move. I don't know that moving off him in favor of Russell Wilson was the smartest move that the Pittsburgh Steelers could have made. Nonetheless, it's the one they did make. And now he winds up with the Jets. So he's their rookie head coach for the Jets. Do they decide to go ahead and get skill position on the offensive side, or do they go? Again, a lot of moves here I think this is McMillan. Number one wide receiver on the board. Arizona wide receiver. Arizona State fans are going to get mad at me for that one. But McMillan's a guy to me. I've seen, if you follow as many boards as I have, most have him as the number one wide receiver by a pretty large margin. But they also have him going anywhere from 7 to 27. So the Jets have never been one to follow the consensus opinion. You got to go back to like Quinnen Williams the last time they made that move to get a guy that everybody kind of looked at and said, yes, good move. But again, this is a new coaching staff, a new group at the top here. We'll see what they decide to do. Then we got to look past them and go to the Carolina Panthers and New Orleans Saints at 9. The Panthers have an opportunity here to address some major concerns. I know they're also in the need for a wide receiver possibly as well. Good question here by Chris in the chat. Thank you, sir, for this one. Would Jalen Walker at 8 be a reach? No, I don't think Jalen Walker at 8 is a reach. And here's why. I think the beauty of a guy like Walker, now we have him pegged up at 17. We had most of the time had him between picks 12 and basically 20. But at 8, I don't see it as a reach. I think ultimately if you were going to take Walker at 8, you could probably move back maybe to 12, 13, somewhere in there and take him and still be safe to do so. The question is, if you don't think you can move back, you go ahead and take him, because I don't think it's that big of a gap between a guy like Walker and what you would have had to pay him versus what you are going to pay him at 8 on the board. You've got to address the run defense. It was bad last season. You're going to have to build a defense up one way or the other for Dave Canales, whether you want to start at the back of the secondary and move forward, or you want to start at the front, up front with guys that can come off the edge or in the interior line and address some of those concerns. Walker, again, versatile guy, multi-year starter at Georgia. Good defensive scheme that he worked there under Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, Dan Schulman, guys like that. They had a lot of great teaching there on that defense. And we're going to see some other Bulldogs come off the board early and often here in these first 2 rounds. So it wouldn't shock me if they stay put at 8, they take Jalen Walker. I think Walter Nolan would also immediately address that. That's why we have him sitting there at 8. The Jets pick is in at 7. And let's see where the New York Jets decide to go this year. The Carolina Panthers are on the clock. Okay, so here we go. First deviation from our board tonight. Armand Membou, the offensive lineman out of Missouri. Plug and play left tackle. That's what this is. Hard to, you know what? I sit here and say this. It's hard to be upset by this pick. It might tell us more about what the Jets are looking to do in this offense. 6'4", 332. The Missouri offense ran the ball a lot. And maybe if you're the Jets and this new coaching staff, they want to address the run game. They want to be a little bit better balanced, and certainly they were last year. They got Breece Hall in that backfield. I mean, this is certainly a scenario. If you're going to go ahead and address the run game, you go ahead and get an offensive lineman. And the Carolina Panthers wasting no time. Quick pick in. So they are not going to move back. They're going to take the pick here. So then this, to me, if you're going to move this quickly to the pick, do they decide to go defensive line or linebacker, or do they go ahead and get another pick that we didn't talked about as probably as early as the Jets, is a guy like Tyler Warren? It's another position the Panthers need, tight end, if you want to go that route. I would think going tight end at 8 is early, and it's probably a misuse of that high of a pick. But if you think you can't get him or get anybody to trade back up with you to get, a pick ahead of the Colts at 14, where we all have him scouted out at, then fine, go up and get your guy. You just have to have the confidence that that's where you want to go with that pick. And then the further down the board we see Shedeur drop, it's interesting to see what teams around this will do, because obviously there are teams at the back half of the first round that we talked about needing quarterback that might want to move up to get him, or get a guy like Jackson Dart. Maybe Jackson Dart doesn't have the rise that has been touted about for the last couple days in the lead up to. There's always a draft riser, late riser. It seems to a lot of people that Jackson Dart seems to be that guy. Do I think Justin Fields is a long-term solution for the Jets? It's going to matter about scheme. And, hiring a defensive head coach, or an offensive-minded, if you're bringing in a new head coach, automatically the first 2 questions out: defensive scheme, offensive scheme. You go ahead and make the move to get a defensive-minded coach in Aaron Glenn. You immediately think they're going to want to be a little bit more responsible on the offensive side of the ball, maybe a bit more balanced. I think that bodes better for a guy like Justin Fields. Here's why. If you're able to run the ball better and you're able to protect better, it opens up some things to do. You can get a little more creative with a guy, because Fields has great legs. We know that. He's got great mobility. He can make plays off script and off time. The question is, if you're going to have the offensive lineman to do what you want to do there. So do I think Fields is the answer? It's going to be more of a scheme fit than anything else. If he's not a scheme fit and he doesn't fit the vision of the Jets, he's not going to succeed. If they want to run a certain offense that he's just not built to do, then it's going to blow up in their face spectacularly. But short-term deal, you don't have to worry about it long-term. I think it's only a 1 or 2 year deal for Fields, and we'll get that information here and see but I believe it's a short-term deal either way. They did not invest long-term in the QB position. So again, I wouldn't be stunned if they go ahead and ride with Fields. And if they're in this position next year and they have no improvement on that side of the ball, they have to draft one or they have to sign one in free agency. If you also want to look that way, you could maybe even scoop a guy up off the free agent hot heap. There's Kirk Cousins still sitting around. We don't know what his future looks like. Maybe to give you two options there at the veteran side. The other thing we haven't even addressed yet, and I've kind of been waiting a little while to do such, is in fact where Aaron Rodgers winds up, because that's also something interesting that's going to shape itself out in this draft. There are a couple of teams that he's spoken to. We've seen conversations take place with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Minnesota Vikings, as well as there were even some rumblings at one point, Nashville with the Titans. That I think that was probably a long shot. If he hadn't done that last year, there's no sense in doing it this year when they're going to go ahead and use their first pick on a quarterback. That shakes up everything a little bit as well. If Aaron Rodgers is in the back of the minds of a couple of these teams, maybe we wait on a first-round quarterback. We don't need Shedeur. We don't need a guy like Jackson Dart. Good point there, Ryan. It's interesting to see. Maybe Kirk does go back to Minnesota. It would probably be the best. It probably wouldn't be the worst move, because they're going to look at a guy that hasn't had a chance to really get a full camp and everything through him without being hurt in J.J. McCarthy. I'm still high on McCarthy there in Minnesota, but it's definitely something that's going to require a backup plan, because we already saw it work out with the one season there out of Sam Darnold. He gets his money. He goes to Seattle. So it begs the question, who do you go to as the backup in Minnesota? Is it Kirk? Is it Aaron Rodgers? Does he complete the Brett Favre arc? Packer, Jet, Viking? Do we see that play itself out again? Wouldn't shock me if we did. But the Carolina Panthers pick is in, and we await to see where they go. I'm going to go ahead and say they're going to address the defensive side of the ball here. As to who that might be, only time will tell, and we'll find out here in just a second. Thank you all for tuning in and enjoying our broadcast here as we are just after 9:02 on the East Coast here. I'm Collins Janis, and we are 8 picks into the first round. Taking an hour to get through 8 picks, guys. Put on the pot of coffee. Great crowd on hand. Let's see what Roger Goodell decides to turn in here for the Carolina Panthers. Under Dave Canales, under Bryce Young, do they decide to go wide out? Do they decide to go to defense and build there? Under Ejiro Evero, the defensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers, they go wide receiver. Tetairoa McMillan off the board from Arizona. Okay, here we go. Here's what I like about it. This is a big option for Bryce Young. Bryce Young is not the tallest quarterback in this draft, in the draft he was in. We did that talk ad nauseum. It's fine. Move along. Size for a quarterback, it used to be a lot bigger issue. But what you can't fail to do is give guys that will go out and make plays in tough situations for your young star quarterback. You're putting a lot of faith in your quarterback and Bryce Young to run this offense. Now you have to address the offense. And that starts with the skill positions out wide. You're giving him a big target to throw to. I know a lot of Panthers fans don't like this pick. And I'm already going to get DM'd immediately. Oh, I hate this pick. What do they do this for? I really do think they needed to address it. You could have maybe moved back and addressed it. But if they thought so highly of McMillan, they go ahead and do this here. I can't hate it because, again, we had this guy centered anywhere from 7 to 27 in this first round. Incredibly large catch radius. And in an offensive line that's still building, in an offense that's still building, a guy that's going to give your quarterback a lot of options and a lot of targets. This is what happens when I try to read and talk at the same time. Again, it's a valid argument, Ryan, and good point from Maddie there. Corner was where I originally had this pick going to on our first mock. I had it originally as Will Johnson, the corner out of Michigan, but actually I had it as Jahdae Barron, originally the corner out of Texas. Second mock, I had it to Will Johnson. Here's why I think they went this direction. They saw the wide receiver board break out the way it did. And if there was any wide receiver in this first round you were going to waste a first round pick on, or not even waste, turn a first round pick on, it's McMillan. Do they immediately still have other needs to address? Yes. One thing I do think that's boding well for them going forward is the QB depth chart, like I said, is strong. That's why we're going to see guys that are going to go before other guys, and you're going to say, well, why did they do this? This player was more talented. This was a better fit. There are a lot of options. You can try that later on, early in the second round. And I think the Carolina Panthers probably looked at that and said, okay, let's go ahead and try to do that. Let's go ahead and give our wide receiver his number one, or our QB our number one wide receiver. I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I know a lot of Panthers fans are going to be mad about it. I don't hate the pick. Wide receiver out of Arizona. I mean, we've seen some offensive skill guys come out of Arizona and do very well. But at his frame, his size, his catch radius, it's going to keep Bryce Young in a position to make plays. That's the biggest thing I can say. Do I think it solves immediately the biggest problems that the Panthers have? No, but I think it solves one of their three biggest problems they have. If I was addressing it and ranking it, it comes out to defense, run stopping. Number one, got to stop the run. 2, skill positions on the offensive side. I wouldn't be shocked if this is in fact Shedeur Sanders, Ryan. I wouldn't be shocked at all. I had him pegged here at 9 on the big board. And Kellen Moore getting to pick his first quarterback. Look, Derek Carr's health situation is what it is. It's a mystery right now. A lot of people still don't understand exactly where he's going to be come training camp time. So even and let's just say Derek Carr, let's say for hypothetical scenario, Derek Carr is 100% healthy, which he isn't. Derek Carr is what he is. Nobody's winning. At this point, I hate to say it, nobody's winning a Super Bowl with Derek Carr. I don't care how well you built the team around him. It's not happening. So what you're doing with Derek Carr is a bridge situation. Now, if you go draft Shedeur Sanders at 9, he can go in and battle at camp and not have to win the job out, and I don't think it's a waste of a pick. I think Kellen Moore wants to be able to dictate his future. I think that's why he waited and he found his opportunities. He went to Philadelphia and showcased what he could do as a coordinator outside of Jerry's world down in Dallas and all the things they had going there. I don't think he was in love with the skills and offensive players they had in Dallas, and he won't admit to. But I think he was definitely impressed with having Jalen Hurts in that offense and all the positions they had to work with over the last season as a play caller there in that offense. I think the Saints have a lot of areas to address, but if you're immediately wanting to change the story and the narrative there in New Orleans, go ahead and get your guy. If this is the guy, I have a hard time believing that the Saints are 100% happy with their QB room right now. Because even if if Derek Carr is not healthy on the other side of that hypothetical, you're turning it over to Spencer Rattler. And Spencer Rattler is probably a serviceable NFL backup right now. I don't see him as a starter. He's a good player at Oklahoma and USC. South Carolina, I know some people are going to correct me, U of SC. So there you go. Here we go. The pick is in for the Saints. We have it as Sanders. We'll see where they decide to go. Is this Sanders? Is it someone else? Is it Walter Nolan maybe? Kelvin Banks Jr. Okay. Third offensive tackle off the board. Tackle out of Texas. This is maybe a tick early for Kelvin Banks. But again, this is what this tells me. This is what this tells me from Mickey Loomis and the entire Saints staff, that they're going to have, this is going to be a couple-year process. They're going to give Kellen Moore a little bit longer of a leash. Because they've already gone through the Dennis Allen experiment. They washed their hands of that. They wasted a couple years trying to figure out whether they wanted to keep him long-term or get rid of him. They decided to cut bait last year. What this immediately tells me is that you're going to say, Kellen Moore, this is your team. We're not looking to move on. We're going to let you build something here. And then as an offensive coordinator, he says, okay, the first thing I need is a premier left tackle. Banks fits that pick. I'm a little surprised he came off the board but not surprised in the order. He was my third best offensive lineman on the board, behind Membou and Campbell. So maybe I'm a little surprised this is where they went, but I'm not stunned. It's maybe a bit early. That's the best I can say. But again, if a guy's there that you want, the old adage is take him. And that's exactly what the New Orleans Saints decided to do there. Banks had been protecting the left side of the offense there for a team that made deep runs in the postseason last year. Ninth overall pick. Again, 3 offensive linemen go off the board. We have 1 quarterback off the board, an edge rusher, an interior defensive lineman, a running back, and a wide receiver that have come up and gone here. So now the Bears are on the clock, and their pick is already turned in. So offensive line, we saw the Bears address in the offseason. Go ahead and get some veterans to help Caleb Williams surround himself there. Don't need to look for a skill position on the offensive side. So then this immediately comes to me to the defense. One of the things that the Bears did really good a couple years ago, even when they couldn't score, even when they didn't have an offense that wasn't led by a guy by the name of Mitch Trubisky, they could defend. They had good edge rusher between Khalil Mack and a couple other guys they've had in there. The thing about this to me is I think this needs to be a defensive back. Now, I have it as Starks. I think Starks is a big-time safety that's going to be able to set himself up well and lock down the future of that secondary in Chicago. But if they decide to go corner, I think Will Johnson is definitely in play here. Will Johnson, another guy, defensive starter there at Michigan. We wondered at the beginning of the broadcast how many we thought we would see from the most players taken in the first round by one school. And I had it as Michigan. Right now we have 1 off the board, could possibly see even 2 or 3 more coming here. And I think Will Johnson will be the second one off the board. Again, a cornerback that, a lot of people were high on. A lot of teams had him as the second best corner on the board. I have him here ranked as the second, but I think, that's a loaded topic. I think it's a health and stability situation. A bit bigger option on the defensive side of the ball. If they don't go corner or they don't go safety, they could maybe address a couple other spots. Maybe they go tight end. I don't think they will. Not with the options they have there. So Tyler Warren sits safe at 14 for right now if you're the Colts. But the other thing that this shakes up is the fact that the next 2 best offensive tackles have gone off the board. We thought the San Francisco 49ers would have to address left tackle. I had it as Membou at 11. Now that Banks and Membou are off the board, that shakes things up a bit. Maybe this is Josh Simmons, the tackle for Ohio State there that goes at 11. It'll be interesting to see how this pick here shakes up what the 49ers decide to do. Or because Membou's off the board, maybe they've been talking with teams trying to move back. It wouldn't shock me there either. They have some concerns on that offensive line they're going to have to figure out. I know they're going to look for guard as well. I just don't have any first-round grades on these guards. Now, that means you can trade back and get a guard if that's what you're wanting to do, or you go ahead and take the next best offensive tackle. But let's see what the Chicago Bears decide to do. We think this is going to be a secondary pick. Wouldn't shock me if it's Malachi Starks. Maybe they want to bolt. This to me has to be a defensive pick. So let's see what the Bears decide to do. And again, a great opportunity for them to recognize the life of Steve McMichael, who we just lost from a 4-year battle of ALS yesterday. I know that's deep in our thoughts and prayers with the McMichael family. And again, going into the Hall of Fame, I was glad that he was able to do it while he was still alive and see his bust honored in Canton, Ohio. But now we'll see where the Bears decide to go. Would be fitting to honor a great defensive player in Bears history by getting another here, a guy that could help. And we're actually, another great coincidence here, a 50th anniversary of Walter Payton's selection to the Bears back in the 70s. Wild to think it was that long ago. but sweetness still looms large in the annals of Bears history. So let's see, do the Bears go defensive secondary or they go defensive line? We'll give them an extra few minutes here as they've got some things to work out. San Francisco is obviously on the clock right now, with Dallas sitting right behind them at 12. Haven't talked about the Cowboys much tonight. I think they're going to have to start looking at edge rushers. Pick is in. Wow. Our first shakeup of the night beyond pick swaps. This is interesting. It's Colston Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan. We thought it was going to be a Michigan player. We thought it might be Will Johnson. In fact, it's Colston Loveland. Not only is this a shock for it being a tight end at 10, but it's a tight end not named Tyler Warren out of Penn State. Wow. Okay. Wow. All right. So big shakeup there. Colston Loveland at 10. Here's why I don't love this. I don't necessarily hate the idea of taking a tight end. I don't like this over Tyler Warren. 6'5", 248 for out of Michigan. Can play him in a fullback setting. I can play him out of the backfield. Can do all sorts of things. A good receiver, lacking in the blocking area. Can get moved off the ball. He's to me, he's a really big slot. That's about it. I'm not saying he's a bad player by any means, but not a fabulous run blocker. And in that Michigan offensive line, they had enough to cover that with the great group they had there for the last couple of years. To me, this is an oversized slot guy. And do you go with an oversized slot guy at 10? I would rather have gotten a guy, if I'm going to take a tight end, that I think does more of both and is a little bit more explosive as a threat in Tyler Warren. And that's a great point, Chris. There are no excuses now for Chicago Bears because they have laid out the skill positions for Caleb Williams to succeed. They added a bunch of offensive line pieces in the offseason. They go now get him a tight end who's basically going to work his way in as a slot receiver. They go ahead and draft receiver in the draft last year. I'm surprised by this one. I really am. And that's not to say I don't think Colston Loveland can be an NFL player and be a productive NFL player on the offensive side of the ball. I just am surprised that Tyler Warren was not the first tight end off the board. I'm surprised a tight end went off the board before 14, if I'm being 100% honest. While we've definitely seen running back regain resurgence in valuation from teams in the first round, I feel like tight end maybe has weakened a little bit. And here's why I say that, because we've seen some premier tight end talents come off the board. Biggest example, I'm going to keep ringing this bell about him, and I hate to be this guy, but Kyle Pitts was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Has never lived up to it in any offense he's been in with the Falcons. And, it's another great point there Chris throws in. He's not from Iowa. He shouldn't have been drafted that high. Well, it's not to say Iowa is the only place that can produce tight ends, but they're certainly the leader of the charge when it comes to the tight end revolution we've seen out of the college level the last couple of years. Again, this is a real head scratcher to me why you go Loveland over Warren. I get maybe wanting to get ahead of some of the teams that might want a guy like Loveland. I didn't have him going until 26. And I mean, I say that as saying realistically, he could have gone anywhere from like 20. I honestly, thinking back on it, looking back through my board now for just a second, maybe he could have gone as high as maybe as high as 20, but I didn't see him as top 10. I really didn't. And again, it comes back to what he provides as a blocker, because it's great to have a slot receiver. It's great to have a big pass catching tight end. Those are all great things to have. But am I really burning the 10th pick on that? I guess the Bears have a different confidence in their defense than I do. So be it. Now we move to 11. The San Francisco 49ers, a team 2 years removed from a Super Bowl loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. We saw a major regression last year. Brock Purdy back at quarterback. Wide receiver room has taken some different shapes as Deebo Samuel has left, made his trip up to Washington. To me, I still think this is probably an offensive line spot here for the 49ers. The question I have now is, are you going for a guy like Josh Simmons? Maybe Connolly out of Oregon? You know, it's tough to say. I think it's offensive line. I just don't think I think it's too early to go for a guard if they want to go for a guard. Now we get a live cut in Shedeur Sanders green room look in Texas there. And it'll be interesting to see how far he falls. He could wind up being the Aaron Rodgers of this deal. And here's the thing. Every team we're going to talk about from here on 11 to 20 has a quarterback. Purdy in San Francisco, Prescott, Tagovailoa, Richardson, Daniel Jones is Michael Penix Jr. with the Falcons, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, and Bo Nix. If you're a team that's interested in Shedeur, you don't have to move up, I don't think. So that means Pittsburgh at 21 could take Shedeur. Because that's going to be, or do the Rams see that as a possibility where they could go get a guy to sit behind Stafford and work while Stafford runs out the rest of his deal? Though they did just make that extension with Stafford. It's not to say they couldn't move him. I just think right now, if Shedeur's going to go in the first round now, this becomes quickly a Steelers or nothing situation for him. But the 49ers pick is in. To answer your question, Chris, do I think Ben Johnson made the call? Obviously, what the Lions have showcased over the last couple of years is a great skill set in their offensive skill positions, with whether it be utilizing the tight ends they've had. Do I think they looked at this as a possibility? Maybe. It wouldn't be surprising if they did. Then again, this Bears front office staff has made some real head scratchers in the past. I sound like I'm being very harsh to him, and I'm not trying to be. I just have a question as to what they saw, what they thought to be the guy you take there at 10. But we're at pick 11 now, with the Cowboys now on the clock as the 49ers have turned their pick in, with Miami set to follow at 13 and the Colts at 14. I have to think this is offensive line for the 49ers. Let's see where they decide to go. Okay, they decide to go defensive line. Here's why this is interesting. It's Michael Williams, another edge rusher out of Georgia. Okay. The thought being here for the 49ers, I could have seen this being addressing the linebacker position. In one mock, I had it as Walker, but they clearly like the edge presence that Michael Williams did. I don't hate this pick. I think their concern, their plan had to pivot, I think, from where they saw Banks go. Once Banks was a top 10 pick, I think they said, okay, we're not going to get Membu. We're not going to get Banks. We can wait to get an offensive guard. We can wait to get maybe another offensive tackle later. If we want to move back into the first round, a guy like Josh Simmons will probably still be there. I don't have Simmons going before, pick 28 or 29, at least on as far as value. So they said, okay, who else do we really like off the edge or off the defensive side of the ball? Because we have to address there. We've seen some losses over the last couple of years that have hurt them defensively. One thing that's great about a guy like Williams, great arm's length. He can get in there, disrupt the passing lanes off the edge. Fits well in a couple different forms and schemes. You can put him down, put a hand in the dirt, go off the edge as a 4 in a 4-3, or you can move him up a little bit and put him in a 3-4 in a rushing situation, and you're not worried about him totally being lost in the middle of the field. Again, the big thing that jumps out to me, size of arm and hand for this guy. He's going to be able to get in there, uncontested, offensive line situations and be able to break up passes or get to those strip sacks. If you're looking at edge rushers, he was easily the second best as far as true edges were concerned. I had him at third on the board just because I thought linebackers like Jihad Campbell, Jalen Walker were going to jump in there as far as that was concerned. And in fact, the way I had the board breaking out, at least in our final mock, I didn't have him in the first round. I thought I had him fall a little bit further. But in the first two mocks, we did have him at about 15 on the board. So going at 11 isn't stunning. It's interesting to see that that's how they valued him. Cowboys pick is in, which means the Dolphins are now on the clock. And oh boy, what does Jerry Jones and company decide to do here? New head coach there in Brian Schottenheimer. And they go Tyler Booker. Okay. Guard out of Alabama. See, I did not have a first-round grade on Tyler Booker. That's not to say I didn't have him as the best guard on the board. I did. I just did not have guard as high as certainly top 15 on this board. Not on value as players. So this is where valuing a player deviates from each team's situation. Now, the Cowboys needed to address offensive line. I thought they would go defensive line first, but they decided to go offensive line. That's not the worst case scenario. So what this tells me is they had a first round grade on Booker, but they had a low first round grade, which means he could be anywhere from where they sat to early second round. They thought this guy's where his value is. And when we talk about this, understand that the chart system that a lot of these teams use was developed by the Cowboys under Jimmy Johnson. To where we slot a player in on the board at the value of pick where they are. Where I think this is a little lopsided is I think Booker at 12 is possibly a bit of a reach, but he's not a bad fit for what the Cowboys are trying to address. That makes sense. So unless they really thought some teams behind them were going to go ahead and grab him, or it's a case of the Cowboys didn't find a trade partner and they could have moved back to get. Not to say Booker is a bad player at all. 6'4", 321 off the board here. Premier guard up the middle, keeping the running lanes open for Alabama, which they've done a lot more in the last 2-3 years, especially with Jalen Milroe at quarterback. Opening up some opportunities in the middle of the offensive line there. You can put him at guard. You can flip him to either side. Again, he's not going to get bullied off the ball. That's for certain. This ultimately comes down to a critique of where they took him, not the fact of the player they're getting. But they saw what they liked at 12, and they went ahead and grabbed him. I had this originally as Mike Green as the edge from Marshall. I thought he might fit better and complement what they have in Micah Parsons. Now, granted, Micah Parsons has been on talk, a lot of trade rumors there, as we really don't know what we're getting from this Cowboys team. I really didn't understand the decision to make Brian Schottenheimer, the head coach. To me, it was the ultimate surrender red flag. We don't have a head coach. All the ones that we had talked to, they made the decision way too late in the year to fire Mike McCarthy. You were either going to fire Mark McCarthy at the end of the year and go ahead and get in on guys like Ben Johnson, guys like Mike Vrabel, or guys like, some of the other, like Liam Cohen or somebody. To me, Jerry just decided, I'm going to hold out and see something here. Or you could have called Bill Belichick, who's going to sit happily at UNC this year. A lot of people said that was the move they should have made. They didn't make it. Fine, so be it. But to hire Brian Schottenheimer seems like such a throw your hands up going, what are we going to do? Brian's in the office. Why don't we hire him? A guy that spent many, many years as an offensive coordinator, not even a play caller in many of those situations, keep in mind. Now he's going to lead the charge for one of the most storied franchises in the NFL. I mean, the most valuable franchise in the NFL, just purely from a numbers standpoint. Fine. To me, it seems like an absolute afterthought. So there you go. Cowboys, it's not a bad pick. It's just not one I would have done there at 12. 13, here we go. The Miami Dolphins haven't had a chance to address any of their topics here tonight. Right now, I see them as in a position to go ahead and grab a corner. And this comes down to preference. Do you like Jahdae Barron or Will Johnson? Maybe somebody else even further down the board, like a guy we talked about, like Trey Amos. If you like those guys enough, go for it. Go ahead and grab your guy and grab a corner. I don't think that's a problem at all. I wouldn't be surprised if this was offensive line either. In a couple of our mocks, we had Kelvin Banks there. Now, granted, I just gave you the diatribe about why I think going for anybody other than an offensive tackle right now is a bit of a stretch at this draft. I think there's going to be players in the second round available that are going to do basically the same thing as anybody as far as talent-wise goes beyond 10. Could also be Malachi Starks out of Georgia. That's a player I was very high on. And defensive philosophy has changed a lot as far as teams and how they decide to build. We saw the Seahawks, the Legion of Boom, really build from the secondary back to the front of the defensive line. Now we've seen teams go back the other way. Some guys value interior linemen, edge rushers more than the secondary. The problem is the league has gone far more in the passing game over the last 4 or 5 years, and you need guys to be able to do both. So it's interesting to see what happens here at 13 with the Dolphins. I think it's corner. I had Johnson as at 16 to the Cardinals. I could definitely see this now setting itself up to be maybe Johnson. Zach checking in there. Hey, what's going on, my man? Panthers off the board with McMillan. How are you feeling? Give us an immediate reaction. I'm not stunned by it. I don't hate it for you. I'm a little surprised that's where they went, but it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out for the Panthers. We'll talk about them a little later on when we get a debrief of the first round. 9:32 here on the East Coast, and we are just plugging away now. Dolphins pick is in. That means the Colts are on the board. And let's see. Zach says should have been defense, but the offense should go burr. I can't roll my R's, so that's the best you're going to get. I think it's definitely a help to a guy like Bryce Young who definitely needed it. So everybody checking in across our accounts, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We're live on Instagram on the Moonlight Media Works official page. We're also live on YouTube and on Facebook. So everybody, however you may be watching us tonight, thank you so very much for tuning in to our second annual draft show extravaganza. Believe it or not a copyright on that name anywhere. So fantastic. A lot of fun so far in this first round, as we are just about halfway through the first round. And the Dolphins have turned their card into the commissioner, so we'll see where they go. Then it sets up 14. This is the only consensus pick I've had, and I will be stunned if this is not Tyler Warren at 14 to the Colts. You need to address some pass-catching options for Anthony Richardson. I think immediately giving him a safety blanket and a guy and a tight end like Warren would definitely be something to address. I've had him in all 3 mocks that we put out as my number 1 tight end on the board and the pick going to the Colts. I can't imagine Colts fans would be at all upset by that. Then you could look at the Falcons sitting there just beyond at 15, and you start to wonder, okay, we see the players that have come off the board on the defensive side of the ball. We see Williams come off. Jahad Campbell's still sitting there. Jalen Walker's still sitting there. It'll be interesting to see how far those guys slide. Because, like I said, I could have had Walker go as high as 8. I could have had Campbell go as high as like maybe 12 or 13. But the pick is in for the Dolphins as the commissioner comes out for it. We will wait and see what the Dolphins have. When we see Shedeur Sanders' name come off the board. Tyler Warren, to me, is probably one of the best players left on the board. Okay, so the pick is in. Kenneth Grant, defensive lineman for the Michigan Wolverines. Okay, so this is an interesting pick. I actually like this pick. Grant had, and this is where I've been talking about it. I've been preaching this all broadcast long. Beyond the top 10, there are a lot of question marks about where these teams valued guys. I've seen this pick marred anywhere from basically 12 on back. And that's where it gets interesting because he's a defensive tackle, 6'3", 331, a little bit bigger than some of the other guys that have come off the board at D tackle. I had Walter Nolen ahead of him on my big board. That's not to say that he doesn't possess some skill sets that have to make the Miami Dolphins impressed. And again, they're in a division with high-end quarterback talent with Josh Allen. They now have to deal with the athleticism of a guy like Drake May and Justin Fields. Different values there in both those players, but still outside the pocket options that are come up there. What this does give the Dolphins is a great interior presence to stop the run and kind of bolster what they do there. I think that's something they're going to have to address going forward because you're going to see some of those teams like we talked about, Buffalo, with James Cook and what they've been able to do. I think the Patriots are going to run the ball a lot more under Mike Vrabel, whether that's with Ramondre Stevenson or they go ahead and add players in the draft. We could see them go ahead and grab somebody in the early rounds. Those are some questions they're going to have to answer. Obviously, the Jets run the ball really well. Kenneth Grant does that. What I disagree with this pick is that it should have been Walter Nolen. I like Nolen. I think he's a little bit more athletic. I think he's a little bit more monstrous up the middle. To me, if you're going to go D tackle here, why is it not Nolen? And again, here's the beautiful part about all this. Look at my good camera. Here, everybody. Every draft pick is a big guess. That's really all it is. We can go back. We were just reminiscing the other day about how bad the 2013 draft class went as far as talents go. We saw 14 picks on offense last season in the first the first 14 players off the board, all covering offense. So far this year, it's a breakdown of 9 offensive, 5 defensive players. Only 1 QB in the first 13. These are some interesting developments to play out. Now the Colts pick is in. To me, this has to be Tyler Warren. If it's not Tyler Warren, I'm going to be stunned. You're going to get some wild social media clip of my eyes just going like this. If it's not Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. I get it. They have a lot of areas they'd like to address. I think if you're going to get a premier tight end, and there it is, Tyler Warren off the board. Okay. The only pick outside of Cam Ward that we had locked in at every draft we did was Tyler Warren to the Colts. I love this pick for them. I think it's brilliant. I think this was really the only move they could go. They're going to have a lot of things they have to address later on in this draft. But Tyler Warren, to me, the best tight end in this draft. 6'5", 256, far more athletic than a 256 tight end should be. He can play out wide. He's a matchup nightmare in the passing game. Big play matchup. You know, better hands than you'd think for a guy that blocks as well as he does. Can come off the edge of the line. And again, we're seeing so many teams utilize it. Great catch radius for a tight end as well. But he is not going to be bullied on the offensive line side of things. If he's going to block, you can go back and watch his tape against SMU in the playoff. And they've even run him out of like a wildcat in Penn State. This guy, to me, is one of the most exciting offensive tight end prospects that we've seen since Kyle Pitts. Some of the other guys like, we've seen in more recent years, as we've seen Hawkinson, other guys like that. He, to me, is a freak athlete. I love this pick for the Colts. Bravo. They may not have gotten a lot of other things right, but Shane Steichen and company nailed this pick. means the Falcons are on the clock now. So we'll see what the Falcons decide to do. They're in an interesting position. Let's see. The last mock we did had Jihad Campbell, the linebacker out of Alabama, sitting here at 15. I have also seen some decisions go around if they want to address the wide receiver position. We talked about it. It's a thin wide receiver room. The guys that are sitting there, what I really like about a guy like Luther Burden III is he's got great speed and separation. And one thing that a guy like Michael Penix Jr. is going to have to deal with is where at Washington State, he had guys that were burning him on the outside. You're going to have a different skill set of guys that are in that wide receiver room in Atlanta. Drake London's your big body, go up and catch it, good catch radius, bigger target, throw up for some jump ball situations. What I like about Burden is he has the ability to move around the slot. You can run him out of the backfield. You can put him out in different situations and wildcat formations and other things. And it gives another target for your rookie or your second-year quarterback at this point to develop. One thing it always boggles my mind is when teams think, okay, we have the quarterback. We don't address some of the other needs at wide receiver. We think what we have is good. A lot of times what teams get caught in trouble doing is thinking what we have in the cupboard is good enough to eat. Not necessarily. Just because you think it works with one guy does not mean it works with the other guy. And just because you have a great talent also doesn't mean that it works. Because Kyle Pitts is a phenomenal prospect, but has never been the prospect we thought he was going to be at the NFL level. So there's a lot of questions to be answered there about that. I think they could go wide receiver. Now, do they like Matthew Golden more? That's another name. I had Golden fitting better at maybe Green Bay or Los Angeles, not San Diego. It should still be San Diego, but that's another story. Do they decide to go that route? I think they're going to dictate the rest of the wide receiver class if they decide to go that way here. If not, then the next team off the board that I think could get aggressive at wideout would be Denver. I think you'll see the wide receiver wait to go past 20 before we see anybody else dig in and decide to go that direction. Right now, like I said, on our big board, we did great for the first 6 players before McMillan decided to fall back to the Panthers at 8. So it'll be interesting. If they decide to go wide receiver, they decide to address maybe secondary as well. Again, Raheem Morris, defensive-minded head coach. I do think, though, now they have to be in the mindset of we have our guy we like. We're moving off of Kirk Cousins. Penix is the future. Let's make our offense dynamic. One thing they've struggled to do between what they had at Arthur Smith there for head coach for a couple of years and a couple of the other names that have worked their way on the offensive side of the ball and the coaching staff in the last couple of years is being dynamic. It's not a terribly hard division to win. Let's put it out there. The Saints, Falcons, Buccaneers, and Panthers. Across the board, it's one of the weaker divisions in the NFL right now. But the longer you wait to capitalize on that, ruins your chances down the road. And Raheem Morris is already on the second time around as a head coach. You're not going to get as long a leash as you should, especially when people think they passed up Bill Belichick for you. And that's forever going to be the story. That's the only other job he interviewed for. So one guy that you don't go with, the spotlight gets a little bit bigger. And I think they were in a prime position last year to take advantage of a weak division. They didn't. Tampa Bay did. Tampa Bay continues to do that. It'll be interesting. 44 seconds. They are taking all their time on this one. Jalen Walker is another name that could go off the board here. Would make a lot of sense. There was a lot of analytics here that would say that it would be a surprise that he was still there at 15. I think between 15 and 18 is where I had him on this board. So if he goes at 15 right now, I think it's premium value for the Falcons. And if they're going to go address defense, that means to me that they're confident that they see something in the second round that can bolster that offense. And the longer we sit here and talk about it, like, unless somebody's moving back in to one of these picks between 15 and 21, we could wait a little while longer to hear Shedeur Sanders' name come up. And do we see Jackson Dart jump ahead of him? I had Dart as my pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But something about this, to me, seems to think that there's going to be a team that we've already seen pick, maybe jump back in there and try to get a pick ahead of the Steelers. It wouldn't shock me, because if I'm the Seahawks, or if I'm the Buccaneers, I think the Buccaneers might be in the prime position to benefit from this. It wouldn't shock me at all if the Buccaneers decide they don't need anybody at 19 that bad, that they can trade back with a team like maybe even a Cleveland or somebody. Cleveland trades back into the first round, goes ahead and gets a guy like Shedeur or Jackson Dart. Maybe the Giants think the same way. The Giants, they sat there at 3, took Abdul Carter. Nobody's going to shake a stick at that pick. But you still have to address the long-term future of your quarterback and your offense. Do you trade back into the first round and grab a guy at 19, maybe just ahead of where you think you might go at Pittsburgh at 21? The pick is in for the Falcons as the Cardinals are now on the clock. Arizona, we have them projecting at taking a cornerback here. So could be Will Johnson, could be Jahdae Barron. Maybe even a guy like Trey Amos or Siobhan Revell. Revell was a one-round – before the injury last year, Siobhan Revell was a first-round talent. Won't shock me if he moves his way back in, if teams value him that way. Let's see if the Falcons decide to go corner, linebacker possibly. They go Jalen Walker. I love this pick. I love this pick for the Falcons. Beautiful pick here. I love it. So Jalen Walker, here's where this is really exciting for the Falcons. Their defensive philosophy under Morris is set in stone the way they want to run it. And what I love about Jalen Walker is he's got versatility, but he is going to be a force in the middle of this defense for years to come. If he's healthy, if he's able to fit into the scheme that Morris and company have for him here, he fits really well. You could bring him off the edge if you want to. You can put him in a 3. The beauty of a guy like Walker is he works well as a down rusher in a 3-4, or you stand him up, put him on the edge of a 4-3, or you stand him up in the middle of the field and you just have him patrol. Like, that's the thing. He can lock down the middle of a defense. He can bring it off the edge. I really like the versatility this gives the Falcons defense. You've got some age on the rush side of things with Matthew Judon getting up there in age a little bit more. 6'1", 243. Again, standout player in a Kirby Smart defense. That's hard to be. You see Mikael Williams go off the board. This is the other guy on the other side of things. Now, here's the question. Do you want to employ him in the middle of the field, coming up the middle as a stand-up linebacker, or do you want to put a hand in the dirt and let him go off the edge? I like the versatility, but I wonder how much of that is the opportunities that were given to him by the defense, by the guys in front of him. If it's because of Williams coming off the other side that he's getting this much attention, that's something you're going to have to factor into. But if you look at his tape, again, great arms, great strength off the edge. If you want to put him down there, he can match up well with a left tackle, your premier guys that are going to be – he's going to see in the NFC South and across the NFC as a whole. So I like this pick. Walker could go anywhere on this board. He could have even gone as early as 4. There were people in New England that loved him in the pre-draft process. So 4 to 24, anywhere in there, Walker was going to be an option. I think there were a lot of scouts that were surprised he slid to 15. But again, Jalen Walker, great pick for the Falcons. Much more sane, much more logic put into their draft process this year. Instead of just throwing a bag, at Kirk Cousins for multi-years and drafting a quarterback with your first overall pick, you go ahead, shore up something on the defensive side of the ball, really helps you out in that respect. So 5 minutes remaining for the Cardinals with their pick at 16. Great crowd still on hand here in Green Bay, Wisconsin, home of the draft. Appreciate everybody checking us out here tonight as we continue with our draft show extravaganza. Back for more in 2025. Had a great first year last year. A lot of exciting picks that have already come off the board, but some names that people are interested at home to hearing about. If you got questions, drop them in the comments. We can take them here. We'll check them out as best as we can. Like I said, we apologize for some of the earlier misses here. We're still getting used to some of this technology thanks to the fine folks at Riverside. We've been able to stream this both live on YouTube and live on Facebook. So thank you, however you might be watching. We've been doing our check-ins live on Instagram. But YouTube's been a great help to us here in this process, and we've got our big board. We've had a little trouble for everybody. We're working through that. It's a one-man operation here, so we apologize for those that haven't been able to keep an eye on our draft board, but it was, in fact, all over our social media, so if you're curious to see who we missed on, who we hit so far, it's out there on our Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. If you want to check those out, the mock draft is up there as we sit at pick number 16 is locked in on the board for the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals saw a trend in the right direction last year. Chance to move up as there's been a shaking of the guard in the NFC West. Saw a down year for the 49ers. They're picked at 11. The reshaping of the Seahawks with now quarterback Sam Darnold in play there. They sit at 18 just behind Kyler Murray and company. Do they decide to go for a wideout? This is another option they could look at. I have them taking corner. Will Johnson, to me, sitting here at 16 is great value if you can get him. And that's going to be said of a couple teams here. I don't think the Bengals who sit behind you are going to go corner. I think they need to go linebacker or edge. Obviously with Sam Hubbard and the losses we've seen both in the secondary and in the defensive line for Cincinnati, they have to address one of those things. I don't think they'll go defensive line, but it wouldn't shock me if they did. I thought they'd probably go linebacker. I think it might help them a bit more. But if they want to go edge, there's Donovan Ezeraku, the edge out of Boston College. There's James Pierce Jr., edge rusher out of Tennessee. We had him at 18 and 19 respectfully. And it'll be interesting to see whether those guys move themselves up to 17 on the board or, in fact, the Bengals kind of wait out and see what the Cardinals decide to do here. The pick is in for Arizona. Let's see where they decide to go. Walter Nolan coming off the board. Okay, so this, I've spoken about him at length tonight. Didn't think I'd see the Cardinals be the one to pick him up. I think this is a best case scenario, best player available in a lot of ways for the Cardinals. This is a value get. I had him as a top 10 pick. He falls to 16. I can't hate this one. While he's maybe not addressing it's not addressing the top need for the Cardinals, it's certainly a need. Defensively, they have to get better. I think they were trending in the right direction. This is going to be a really big get for them. First Ole Miss first rounder since 2017. Got to go back to Evan Ingram, the last time we saw an Ole Miss Rebel taken in the first round. I like this pick a lot. I do. As the Bengals are now on the clock, Nolan comes off the board. Now this opens up some scenarios for the Bengals war room. Do they like what they saw in the fall for a guy like Johnson out of Michigan? Or did they sit pat with taking a linebacker or edge rusher? I think the only way they go corner now is if they saw something fall down the board they didn't expect to see there. And Nolan had a good career. He started it at Texas A&M, spent 2 seasons there at Love Field in Texas A&M. Then he goes and takes the bump up to play with Lane Kiffin and company on their defensive line. Good motor, again, getting through some bigger offensive linemen in the SEC is always impressive, and he does it with raw power. I mean, he gets through there. He's going to stop the run very well for a team in the NFC South with teams that want to run the ball, like the Saints, or excuse me, I'm talking about the NFC West. My apologies. We're talking about teams, that are going to have to start running the ball. Obviously, San Francisco with Christian McCaffrey, that's what they want to do. That's their bread and butter. Seattle with a great running back in Kenneth Walker when healthy. You look also over at the Rams. They've got some options now they like to do, and they like to have a little bit better balance for Matthew Stafford. So to me, it's a case of value pick at 16. I think that's ultimately why they go Nolan. I don't think they expected Nolan to be there. I didn't expect him to be there. I like the pick. So the Bengals with 5 minutes left on the clock or so with their selection, that would then put the Seattle Seahawks pick number 18 sitting right behind them. Seahawks went 10-7. The Bengals just missing out on a playoff spot last season. No, they'll look to try to work their way back into playoff contention with Joe Burrow coming back healthy. They're able to sign their receiving core up. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. They got those guys in place now. The downside of that is defensively, they have regressed. Last year, they were torched by even the Russell Wilson-led Pittsburgh Steelers. They let they've let teams go up and down the field on them defensively. So one area that I think they have to improve upon immediately, especially now that Lou Amarillo is gone, he's moved his way over to Indianapolis. I think that's going to help the Colts defense. I don't blame the downgrade and regression on Lou there in Cincinnati. I think the talent that they failed to get in the previous drafts is ultimately what hurt this defense, because those guys got older. Some of those guys did. Some of them, like Jesse Bates, left for more money elsewhere. And when you have a certain set in your hand and you deal those cards away, you can't always expect these guys to jump in and immediately replace it. And they didn't do a good enough job, in my opinion, of doing that in the last couple of years, whether it was through free agency or not. So the draft here is where you have to make up for past sins. And I think the Bengals have a chance to do that here. The pick is turned in. So once the commissioner comes back out, we'll give you that selection here for the Cincinnati Bengals. Tough division between Baltimore being where they were with Lamar Jackson and company. And, Pittsburgh was a tough out last year. They made the run they did because of what they were able to do in good coaching. But I think there are just enough questions now. Their QB room has gone elsewhere. It's interesting to see this kind of break its way out here as we continue to look. But again, we're sitting here with the Bengals in a prime spot. See if we've missed any questions here from anybody else. We'll happily take them all night long. If you guys got questions, drop us a line. We'll answer them here as best as we can. So we can address some of the topics that we've seen already go through, or players that are not yet off the board. We've seen some names that have already slid. If you're wondering about it, we can answer that as well. Surprised by a couple of these picks, we can also address that as well. But so far, there haven't been a whole lot of head scratches. The Bears with Loveland over Warren so far is, I think, the most egregious move of the first round. I think right now the Browns are a winner. One of my early winners. I guess of giving grades so far, again, this is tough to do. Good question here from Chris in the comments section. Thank you. Who do I think, if anyone, will trade back into the first round? So I think the Giants, maybe even the Browns, are a candidate to trade back into the first round. Beyond that, let's see. Of the teams that have already taken, you could possibly see maybe the Saints trade back into the first round. I think that might be a stretch. But where a lot of this discussion of trading back in came from was where both Cleveland and the Giants wanted to address major needs with their first picks at 2 and 3 at the time. Now, the Browns have obviously questions at quarterback, as do the Giants. If they see a scenario where they think they can go back and get a guy like Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders, maybe they trade back in. And the beauty of what the Browns did is they got the capital to move. And the pick is in for the Bengals. They're going to go edge rusher. They're going to go Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Okay. So they valued Stewart ahead of his teammate Nick Scourton and Donovan Ezeraku, as well as James Pierce Jr. Okay. So it was interesting to see which of the two A&M rushers was going to go off the board first. Shamar Stewart goes there to the Bengals. I don't hate the move to get an edge rusher. They valued Stewart higher on their board than I did. But again, premier edge rusher. They had two options to choose from with Texas A&M. They go with a 6'5", 267-pound edge rusher. Again, lined up more often in the left side of the matchup with the premier left tackles that they saw in the SEC. So it was a coin flip for me between those two. I had them basically. I had Scourton ahead of Stewart, but Stewart over Scourton. It's not egregious. And it's not terribly egregious to go ahead of Donovan Ezeraku. I don't think he'll wait too long to go. I think we'll see his name called here in the next 5 or so picks. That means the Seahawks are on the board for that coaching staff up there in the great Northwest. Some interesting changes. We've seen Sam Darnold come in at quarterback now. Tyler Lockett going out the door. They still have their big play options in Kenneth Walker. I think this has to be a defensive pick. It's a defensive-minded coaching staff. Opportunity to address and try to counteract what we see offensively in the NFC West. We see great run games out of teams like San Francisco, where they have plug-in-and-play guys. And granted, when McCaffrey's healthy, he's still a top 3 running back in the league, no doubt. That's a big if. That's a big question. But we also see what the Rams bring as far as scheme and what they're able to do offensively. So it wouldn't surprise me if this is Donovan Ezeraku, James Pierce Jr., maybe even a guy like Nick Scourton out of Texas A&M. I think there's a lot of ways this Seahawks pick could go. And then that's the domino effect to what Tampa Bay decides to do. I think while they definitely have 3 or 4 options that they like on their board at this pick, I think it's a wait and see for a couple teams behind 18 here. For those just joining us or just tuning in, it has been a very offensive-heavy draft to start. We're starting to see that pendulum start to swing back the other way. We saw Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Will Campbell, Ashton Jeanty, Tetarora McMillan, as well as Armand Membu and Kelvin Banks Jr. go early. So the pick is in for the Seahawks. And all smiles in the Cincinnati Bengals war room. I hate to be this critical, but this is a big draft pick for the Cincinnati Bengals. It's a mid-round pick, I get it. There's a lower conversion rate on those picks than we see a lot of times. The back half of the first round beyond 15 is usually where we see teams take gambles, take chances, take a project. And I'm not saying that Shamar Stewart is, but it's certainly interesting to see them go with Stewart. I don't hate it. I think it'll be interesting to see it play out now. And I'm going to pull up a stat here that ESPN's Paul Hembu, a content producer, pulled out from last season's draft, and I think we referenced it last year. This was covering the last 20 drafts from about 2000 to 2020. The hit rate on players drafted in the first round. We see the highest hit rate go at 92% on centers. And what I mean by a hit rate is based upon whether a player signed a second contract with a team. So to answer your question, Chris, here's why teams are probably a little scared to take secondary players. I think there's a lot of great talent on the board, but dating back as early as 2000 of the last 20 years or of a 20-year gap between 2000 to 2020, cornerbacks have hit at a 38% ratio in the first round. Offensive tackles have hit at about 59. We've seen a lot of those go early. 50% on guards. Those are the only three positions, center, offensive tackle, and guard, that have gotten to a second contract more than 50% of the time. Linebackers and quarterbacks at about 48 and 46 respectively. Edge rushers, 44% have gotten to a second contract. Why I think teams have leered the other way is that hit rate we talked about. Now Gray Zabel goes off the board here. Okay, this was my number 2 guard on the board. Here's why I think this is a bit early. I had him ranked as maybe the 29th best player in this first group of players. Zabel at 18, it might be a bit of a stretch, but if you think, okay, we're going to go 6'5", 312 guard, that's fine. It's interesting to see them go Zabel there. I think you could have waited. And again, when I say teams could have waited, I'm talking solely on value. If they couldn't find a trade partner, then fine. If you're so in love with a guy, take him. I can't talk you off it. I think at left tackle, it's a necessity every team has to have. Clearly, the Seahawks, knowing what they have now in Sam Darnold, know they have to protect Sam Darnold. What we've seen Sam Darnold struggle with all of his career is protection. He's not a guy that's going to roll around and give you plays off script. He's not going to make plays with his feet. He has decent footwork, but he's not mobile. He's a guy that needs structure. And one thing you have to give a guy like that is a strong enough offensive line to play in structure. So getting an offensive lineman, fine. You're going to go get a guard to shore up that left side, fine. I think Zabel was probably a little high at 18, but second best guard, I can't shake a stick at it. So now the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock with 6 minutes remaining. Great questions all night long. Thank you guys for contributing them. We'll answer as many as we can here. I think, but to answer your question, Chris, I think that's ultimately why we haven't seen more corners off the board. Because right now, Jahdae Barron sits there at corner. I think you can even play him at safety if you're really desperate. Will Johnson out of Michigan sits there. And then there's this line of guys that I think are going to wind up in the last 10 picks or so of the first round. And that includes guys like Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, Siobhan Revell out of East Carolina. There's some options there. Trey Amos. What position group do Panthers go round 2? Okay, so that's a great question. I think it has to go defense. If your first pick in the second round is not a defensive player, I think Ejiro Evero is going to jump off a building. I mean, you have got to shore up the defensive line, the secondary, the linebacker. The whole defense needs upgrades. I would say probably you go defensive line or you go linebacker. And I think the guys like Nick Skillerton are might possibly still be there. They might not. But this is a deep defensive line draft as well as linebackers. So I think there's some options there. It would be a shock to me if the second round pick of the Carolina Panthers was not a defensive player, either on the defensive line or in the secondary somewhere. That's just my opinion. I had originally put Jahdae Barron and Will Johnson as somebody I thought the Panthers would be interested in. They obviously go wide receiver. That's fine. You want to give your QB of the future is target. I can't argue the logic. I could say that I think you have so many other areas you have to patch and you have to hit. You have to hit on that second round pick. It can't be a flyer on a second. That would be my thing. It can't take a guess. Quite a story developing here in the later half of the first round. We've kind of been dancing around it. we're closing in on where I think some teams could get really interesting with who's left on the offensive side of the ball. We've seen some edge rushers go. We've seen some offensive linemen. I think the Broncos are in a neat spot here. We saw a huge jump early from a rookie in Bo Nix. A lot more than any scout probably even had. He makes this team so scary. What I think makes them interesting, though, is they have the opportunity to go and get skill position at wideout. They have Matthew Golden, Emeka Egbuka, as well as Luther Burden. Those are all guys I could see go to the Broncos at 20. They would have also been a guy that I thought when Colston Loveland was still available that could have gotten in on that conversation, but now I'm not. Stay away. Stay away from a tight end at this spot. I don't think we'll see another first-round tight end. I think you see wide receivers come here. How many more quarterbacks get drafted here tonight? As many as 2. No more than 2. I can't see it being more than 2, and I think it's probably going to be closer to 1 now. If the Steelers had the choice between Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart, which I didn't think they were going to have, they now have, I would have to think it's got to be Shedeur. ESPN Draft Day Predictor put up the stat that they were only going to have a 7% chance at Shedeur at 21. So the odds makers saw the line move, and again, if he winds up going at 21, I think that's probably the best case scenario Shedeur Sanders could ask for. I think they do still probably go get Aaron Rodgers. I really think the Steelers are the team that's going to take Rodgers in this offseason. If he doesn't retire, I think the Steelers go grab Aaron Rodgers, sign him to a 1-year deal. I think that's the best case scenario for a guy like Shedeur. Does not have to play. If you're drafting at 21, you're drafting a quarterback, you're not drafting him with the sole intention like a team in the top 15 is drafting a quarterback. Those guys are drafting because they need player now. They have nothing else. Now, granted, the room has gone thinner there in Pittsburgh, but I think they'll go ahead and address that. So it'll be interesting to see as everything, and it's Emeka Egbuka going off the board to the Buccaneers. Okay, all right, this is interesting. So we've seen injuries kind of beat up the receiving core for the Buccaneers. So what this tells me is that they're no longer set with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin being healthy long term, and I get that. And I had Egbuka as this. Let's see here. I had him as the second best wide receiver on the board behind Travis Hunter, behind Tedorora McMillan as a full-time wide receiver. I guess Travis Hunter was the number 1, but he's a split player, only going to get him about 50% of the time. So Egbuka goes here, big player, but really good speed for a guy that's going to line up on the outside. He can come across the field and crossing routes really well. You got to see that. And again, the Ohio State offense really utilized him well, I thought. And they had some options around him that help complement what he does. But I think overall, you can move him in, you can move him to the side, you can move him all the way around the offensive line. He's got the speed to move, but he's still got a good enough size and frame that he's not going to get bullied by a bigger corner. A lot of times when you're drafting wide receivers, it comes down to a battle of speed and size, where a guy like Egbuka here, he comes off the board at 19. I like the pick. I thought they were going to go maybe defensive line, but I don't hate this for him. It's going to add another option for Baker Mayfield. And what this pick tells me more than anything else is assurance. Mike Evans is getting old, and Chris Godwin can't stay healthy. Both those things have hurt you over the last couple years. I think he's going to be in a great spot to learn under Mike Evans and a bunch of this receiving core they already do have, but he's immediately going to jump the board up on their depth chart. So I like that pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And clearly, if the Carolina Panthers and Saints and other teams aren't going to draft corners, why not? Why not stock up on wideouts? If they're not going to draft secondary players, why not? So here's the Broncos. They've got 3 minutes and 30 seconds left before they turn their card in. And now Egbuka goes off the board. I had the Broncos looking at wide receivers. So to me, it comes down to Matthew Golden or Luther Burden III. I like Burden just a little bit more for versatility and speed than I do Golden. So I could see it being either one of those guys. To me, you're just adding pieces. Not to say that the receiving core in Denver didn't work last year, but it could be better. I think that's ultimately the case. And when you're sitting at pick 20, like we said, you take experiments, you take some options. Again, they're first round talents, but you're no longer having to pay the premium a guy in the top 15 is going to go for. And just behind them sits at 21 Pittsburgh Steelers. So things are about to get spicy, folks. Tune on in. We're going to get it here for you. We're going to go back live on Instagram so everybody can check this out. As we are at pick 20 here in the first round, just after 10:15 here on the East Coast. We appreciate everybody that's checked in with us all night long. It's a good critique there, Chris. You know, Tampa Bay does have the luxury of having those guys. But like we said, that injury to Godwin is a concern. And even if he says, okay, the doctors clear him to play, we've seen it time and time again where guys lose their edge after an injury like that and they're never the same. I have always been a fan of Godwin's game, but when he can't stay on the field, you have to have somebody that can. And I think, you know, this is a great setup to pair alongside a guy like Mike Evans. It's actually, this is awful to say, and it's a lot of pressure to put on a young kid right out of college, but his game reminds me a lot of Mike Evans' game. Evans probably a little bit more time spent outside than Egbuka, but again, it's not a crazy pick. Not at all. So we wait and see with the final minute here of the clock remaining for the Broncos to turn their card in. And then Pittsburgh, Chargers, Packers, Vikings, Texans, Rams, Ravens, Lions, Commanders, I almost call them the football team, Bills, Chiefs, and Eagles right now in order as it stands. We'll see if any teams decide to trade back in. We'll decide to see if any teams try to trade up. We've been pretty steady, locked and loaded here for the rest of the first round after a little bit of moving and shaking up front. However you may be joining us, we appreciate you tuning in tonight. Who's McMillan's comps? That's a good question. I think McMillan's comps are going to be your wideouts that look more like it's tough to say it because this is the tricky part of the evaluation process. Because if I come out and say a guy is a copy of a Davante Adams type, then you go, oh my God, it's got to be Davante Adams. And it's like, McMillan probably sits somewhere. You know what he is a great comp? Probably a pretty really comfortable comp I'm willing to make. At a young age, he reminds me a little bit of like an AJ Green. AJ Green, a couple of those wide receivers we saw out of Alabama for a couple of years. Bigger targets, good catch radius. Also on that front, I think, you know, he matches up well in the regards with a guy like, to a lesser extent, you could look at a guy like even Julio Jones a couple years ago. I really like that kind of frame and size, ball control, sideline control. The pick is in for the Denver Broncos. No, I can understand why you would worry about. And you know what? That is a concern because Kelvin Benjamin was supposed to be a type like that, and he turned out to be not the player that the faithful in Carolina were hoping he was going to be out of Florida State. So we shall see. Now, again, we've talked about some names that haven't come off the board. It could be a case of the Broncos deciding to go ahead and grab one of these guys we haven't talked about, whether it's James Pierce Jr., Donovan Ezeraku. But I have to think this is a wide receiver. You've got your QB of the future. You don't have a bad offensive line. It could be better. It could definitely be better. But I certainly think right now the Broncos are in a position. Egbuka comes off the board. I don't think they ever looked at him as the pick they were going to make anyways. So let's see what they decide to do. Pick 20 is in. We wait on the name. And it looks like the Broncos are going to turn in this pick, and it is okay. Jahdae Barron. All right, so here's where this came from. This pick is where they valued Barron as the second best corner on the board. Okay, and if that's the case, if they had a grade at 2 on him as the second best corner, then value pick play here is the case for Denver. I thought they'd go wide receiver. I get why they go one and here or go with a cornerback here. They do have Jaquan McMillan, who I think is a younger, undersized corner, but really great at ball awareness and stuff. So Barron gives you some flexibility. He's 5'10", 194. This is also a guy I think if you're really desperate, you could move him to if you don't love him at corner long term, you can play him at safety. I think he fits. But right now, he's a great tackler. You know, for his size and frame, that definitely helps. Whereas McMillan's a ball corner that's going after these receivers. Barron, you know, he's a bigger body that can get in the way of some passing lanes here. Off the edge and athletic outside. You know, he's going to get the big matchups with your guys that are going to go outside. And he's a sure tackler. One thing you love to have in corners nowadays are guys that can make a tackle. Doesn't take anything away from his ball skills as an actual corner. I just think his strength is really as a complement. And I think that's what he's able to do. He's able to stop, you know, tacklers in their or rushers in their tracks, whether it be the quarterback getting outside the pocket. If you want to bring him in on a corner blitz, I think he fits beautifully in a scenario like that. So Jahdae Barron, this is a value pick, and I think it's a very good secondary they have in Denver. And it's not just, and you know what? You might say, okay, they can maybe afford to go get a wide receiver when they're that good. The way this wide receiver board is breaking out, I think they think now there's going to be wide receivers they like in the second round that they don't have to burn a first on. Well, you saw this happen a couple years ago with the New England Patriots. I thought at the time the bigger priority was to go get an offensive lineman. They wound up with Christian Gonzalez, and they only wound up with Christian Gonzalez because he fell down the board from where scouts and, you know, the fan bases of all the, you know, the front offices of all these teams thought he would be. So once he fell into New England's lap, they saw value. They said, we're going to take it now. The Steelers have turned their pick in already quickly off there. It's time to see whether this is Shedeur Sanders or, in fact, going to be a curveball thrown in here. Is this Jackson Dart, quarterback out of Ole Miss, 10.8 yards per completion last year, led the FBS in yards per pass attempt? It's interesting. This is the ultimate, you know, Sophie's choice here. Do you want strawberry ice cream or do you want Rocky Road? What flavor are you looking for here? Do you want the accurate pocket passer who's got good footwork, or the guy who's going to, you know, be able to move around and be able to make the big throws, a little bit more creative in the offensive side than what we're used to seeing in the NFL level? Lane Kiffin and that offense has produced some great talent. I'm just curious to see if this quarterback they have is truly a first-round grade or if he's later on in the second round. To me, he's the third best quarterback on the board. Jackson Dart's third best quarterback on the board. If you like him better than Shedeur, then you're bumping him to 2. We'll see what they choose to do here. This is going to be one of the most anticipated picks of the draft, so settle in. We're ready for it. And they decide to go defensive tackle Derek Harmon. Wow. Wow. Okay. Hand up. I don't get this one. Yeah, I haven't been left without much to say tonight. I've successfully talked for over 2 hours and 30 minutes by myself. Derek Harmon, defensive tackle, Oregon, 6'4", 313. We've seen a lot of defensive tackles go. I got to be honest with you guys. I get why they wanted to bolster the defensive line. I just Mike Tomlin's been able to do a lot of things with a lot of really non-exciting quarterback play. The quarterback depth chart in Pittsburgh looks like this right now. Mason Rudolph. What's the deal here, guys? I'm stunned. I really am. I'm stunned. To not take Dart or Sanders here at 21 is a shock to me. And that's not a slight on the player Derek Harmon is. He would have been a great fit in a lot of teams. A good defensive tackle, good size, swallow up runners. Not overly thrilled with him as a rusher or the quarterback, but again, a great run stopper. And again, the Pittsburgh identity, they want to be their identity always revolves around defense. I get that. Even though in more recent years that hasn't been the case, they guess they're trying to work their way back to it. I'm surprised. I really the bigger now here's the question. This is panic time if you're Shedeur Sanders, that you miss out on the first round altogether. Unless okay. I'm just formulating a thought here live, so bear with me for a second. The way this board breaks out, 22, 23, they're not looking for quarterback. 24 doesn't either. Houston's got theirs at 25. 27 has the Ravens. 28, Goff. Washington has their QB. Buffalo has their QB. If there's another opportunity for Shedeur to fall in the first, to stay in the first round, the only option I see is the Rams. Otherwise, he falls to the second. Unless a team trades back in. And I don't think right now the teams that we're interested in trading back in are too stunned. Because look, now be the benefit of the deal that the Browns made with the Jaguars. They have the early second round pick. I can't see the Vikings making that move. I can't see the Lions making that move. The only team I can see making the move for a quarterback right now in the first round would be the Rams. Matthew Stafford did just sign an extension. I'm surprised. I am surprised. That is interesting. See if we can get any insider information here. If you can read the tea leaves, this tells me now that the Pittsburgh Steelers are probably going to make the push for Aaron Rodgers. They may still draft a quarterback in the second round. The Browns could trade back in. They have the capital to do it if they want. I know there was talk that they were possibly interested in Shedeur. Now you have to question it, though. You have to question whether or not they make that move back in or not. I'm surprised. I'm very surprised by this. So 22, we haven't even talked about the Chargers yet. They got 3:15 left before they have to turn theirs in. And, The Chargers are another team I look at possibly strengthening that offense. Matthew Golden would, to me, make the most sense here. Maybe you want to go corner and get Will Johnson. Now, here's where that could be interesting. Johnson's former head coach sits there in Los Angeles. Do they decide to go ahead and draft him at 22? Do they go with a wide receiver? They bolstered their run game, adding Najee Harris. Josh Simmons, the best offensive tackle left on the board. But for me and my money, Matthew Golden is the pick here. It's Johnson or Golden. I'll say that. And the only reason I'm saying that is because of who's coaching this team. I definitely think the Chargers need to upgrade their wide receiver core. But do I think they could do that best by Golden? Yes, I think so. I had them more in the Ibuka camp, but dynamic, speedier option of the two might bode well for Justin Herbert and company. For those curious, my mom made this. So shout out to all the moms out there. We love them all. They're all the best. Taking a fine spot here in front of the big board that you can barely see, but, it was there. And the Chargers have 90 seconds left to turn their card in. It doesn't look like they have yet. So they're taking their time with this one. 22, we have 10 picks remaining here in the first round of the NFL draft. For everybody tuning into the Draft Show Extravaganza, we appreciate you tuning in and being a part of our fun here tonight. Just after 10:30 here on the East Coast in our North Carolina studios, home of Moonlight Media Works. Go ahead and check out all the great projects we've got working on. Everybody there at Moonlight Media Works. The great Scale on Air podcast, working with the fine folks at Scale. Been working on that project, and great group of people that are involved in that. The Sprint Car Scene podcast will be coming back in short order here, as well as some other shows we're going to have coming down the pike this summer. It'll be an exciting summer, so tune in. Follow us on YouTube. Get on there on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We're on all those platforms. Moonlight Media Works. You can find us there. A lot of content to bring to you. A lot of shows we're going to bring to you in the years to come, and a lot of great things coming. So thank you guys for supporting this. This is a passion project of mine, and an opportunity to do great things like this, more live content, more in the moment. The beauty of the setup we have now is we're able to bring you guys live up-to-the-minute content, and we're really happy to be a part of it. And we're glad that you guys have followed along in our journey here. So more to come, and more to come here as the clock has expired, and the pick is in for the Los Angeles Chargers head coach Jim Harbaugh, fresh off a first-round exit with the Chargers last season. Things have to start trending in the right direction, but a good start for Jim Harbaugh and company has returned to the NFL. I think fans of the Chargers and both Justin Herbert are getting a little bit restless, so we'll see if they decide to bolster his offensive weapons or they try to add to the defensive side of the ball with a guy like Will Johnson. Johnson, again, a top 10 or top 15 pick we had in most cases, sitting there on the board. Somebody's going to get a steal on him. They have taken their deliberate time with this one. Makes me think it might be a Johnson. If it was Matthew Golden, I think this pick would have come in faster. I think they had to have an internal discussion, or they saw one of the guys like Ezraku or Pierce fall, and they're just wanting to get value. Green Bay Packers, the hometown team of this draft, are sitting, waiting in the wings, and they're on the clock. Could be another team we see take a wide receiver. If Matthew Golden goes here and the Packers want to take a wide receiver, there's going to be some options that are second-round grades, so I would imagine they might look at Luther Burden Jr. or Luther Burden III, excuse me. I'm not stunned he's still on the board, but I'm certainly surprised some of these teams haven't at least entertain the thought. And I'm willing to bet some of them have. I don't think the Chargers are in play for Burden. I think he's a little bit outside of what their comfort zone is right now and what the offense that Jim Harbaugh wants to run. Here comes the selection from the Chargers here in the first at pick 22. Oh, wow. Marion Hampton, running back, North. All right, okay. No. What on earth are they think? I'm sorry. What on earth are they thinking? They're gonna go running back again? I get it. This is a Jim Harbaugh coach team, but they have put so much emphasis on running back. Did they not just pick up Najee Harris the other day? I mean, what on earth? I mean, give me a second here. Did J.K. Dobbins disappear completely? He did. J.K. Dobbins, Najee Harris. I mean, what are we doing here, guys? I'm not saying Marion Hampton's not a good running back. You don't need another running back. What is the thought process here? I met Jim Harbaugh in person. If I had met him again, I'd be like, what are you doing? Running back at 22? Again, Marion Hampton was the second best running back on my board. It's not a stretch at running back for a team of 1-1. I thought the Vikings might go for that route at 24. They need help at the running back position. What on earth? You just go ahead and get Najee Harris from the Steelers. I don't get this pick. I don't get it. I understand Jim Harbaugh wants a stable of running backs, but there's only one ball, guys. Only one. I get you want to be balanced, and I think they did a better job of that as a whole last season. But to burn the 22nd pick on a running back, I can't be the only one scratching my head right now. Marion Hampton on most boards was the second best running back. You had Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, both running backs out of Ohio State. There's another running. Now that the second best running back's off the board, if a team like Minnesota wanted a running back, they have to look at the guys from Ohio State now. Maybe Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, but I'm sorry. I don't get that pick. I don't get it. I thought the Packers will look wide receiver, and if that's the case, I think it might have to be Luther Burden. It's Burden or Golden. Burden has a good size of speed, or they go Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. I think that would be might be a stretch. Isaiah Bond. I mean, there's great options in this draft class at wideout. I just think right now, if I'm in a position to draft a wide receiver, it's got to be Golden or it's got to be Burden. I'm kind of surprised to see the Chargers just throw blatant disregard to the fact that they needed the help there and not go after that and go for a running back. I mean, I respect Jim Harbaugh as a football man very dearly. I don't get who made this call. That's a real head scratcher. We've only had a handful. Chicago had a head scratcher. I'm trying to review back through here some of the surprises. I'm kind of at a surprise there on that one, guys. Wow. 3 minutes and 30 seconds remaining for the Packers here before they have to turn the card in. I guess somewhere in the equation there, it makes sense to the Chargers. I don't know. I apologize though. I think we've experienced a little bit. We're getting some comments in about the mic. Yeah, I think somewhere during the process, and because we're live now, we can't cut it off and change it. But we did have a slight issue there that we are just remedying now. But it'll apologies there for the quality drop off in audio. But I'm more stunned at what we just saw from the Chargers than anything else. So the Packers have about less than 2 minutes left to turn their card in, and we'll go from there. So to me, this to me has to be offensive skill position. And I think, it's a matter of valuation on the board of who they like more. If it's Golden, if it's Burden, if it's, one of the other wide receivers we talk about further down the board, that's going to be interesting. But I think to me, if I'm the Green Bay Packers, I'm turning the card in and it's going to have the name of Luther Burden III on it. I might be even higher than some people are, but I just know the offense that that Missouri ran really excites me for the pro potential of some of these guys. And talking about the running backs, the offensive linemen, that's why I thought Armand Membu was such a great pick. That the Saints got a guy like that, even though it didn't really scout out as something I saw them taking at 9. I can't really be mad about it because Membu is such a great offensive prospect. What a crowd that's still here, by the way. Shout out to the fine folks at the NFL for what they put on here at Green Bay because there's a sea of humanity out there just outside the shadows of the frozen tundra at Lambeau Field. Taking their time now to get the home crowd hyped up for this one. Pick is finally in. Let's see who the Packers are going to take with this pick in front of the hometown faithful. They're going to let them know one way or the other that they like this pick or not. And sitting behind them, waiting in the wings, are the Minnesota Vikings. So back-to-back NFC North teams here to pick, followed by Houston at 25, and then the Los Angeles Rams. The last real spot we think anybody could take Shedeur Sanders right now on the board. The Packers president and CEO going to announce the pick here, Mark Murphy. Interesting to see where they decide to go here. I think giving Jordan Love a big play wide receiver is certainly something that's got to be on the minds of Packers fans. They've done a better job in recent years drafting defensively, so I don't know that you need to press here for anybody that's left on the board unless you see somebody that fell that you valued at a higher clip and want to get the value pick in. Because this is going to slide the scale for a lot of players that remain here in the first round. Let's see the Packers take really holding the suspense in on this one. pick 23. Matthew Golden. Okay. All is right in the world now. Matthew Gold. It was Golden or Burden. And this was the debate a lot of teams had. The teams that were interested in some of these wideouts. Was it Burden or Golden? Now, Golden, got to showcase on the big stage what he was able to do at Texas, paired up along Isaiah Bond on the other side in an offense that, really had ability to stretch the field, get all over the field, and really create matchup problems for secondary. So Matthew Golden at this pick, I think, is a great pick. Again, it's a flip of the coin. I had Burden. Burden's just a little bit bigger, a little bit more versatile than Golden, but I love Golden all the same. So it's not crazy to think the Packers take Matthew Golden here, and they're going to add this is where we picked him. This is exactly where on the board we picked him, right? Take my word for it if you can't see that. But Matthew Golden at 23. How mad is Aaron Rodgers now? I don't know. At this point, he was kind of calling the shots in a lot of regards, except for what they ended up drafting. So I guess I don't know. He's probably in a darkness room somewhere, so we can't get a comment from him. But, I think this is a phenomenal pick for the Packers and for Jordan Love. And quickly, the Vikings not wasting much time. They're going to get this pick in, turn their card in already, and Golden comes out here to a great crowd and a great reception. I think this is going to be a good fit for them. They've had some younger guys that haven't panned out as perfectly as you would want them to if you're a Packers fan. So this is immediately a guy you're going to look at and go, all right, I'll take the chance here. Let's play the game. And Matthew Golden, I quite like a lot. So this is a good pick for the Green Bay Packers. Now, I had the Vikings taking Omarion Hampton. That's no longer an option. So where do the Minnesota Vikings go with this pick? They didn't waste a lot of time. Certainly the Packers gave them plenty. This is interesting. You have your quarterback you are confident in that you're going to go into camp with, and if not, you're going to get a guy in the free agency by the name of Aaron Rodgers if you're not confident in that. So I don't see them as a threat for anybody here. So do I see them there? This is a depth. This is a starter pick here. So this is something they're looking to decide on either side of the ball. This is interesting. I thought running back was the biggest need they had. And that's not – now, I didn't consider this. This could be Cam Skattebo. Now, you want to talk about really shaking up an offense. Put Cam Skattebo in that offense. You can take a lot of pressure off a guy like J.J. McCarthy. You also set up some exciting options to run some, wildcat, zone read, RPO options for that team. And I know a lot of people their stock has dropped on a guy like J.J. McCarthy. Accurate, delivers a good ball, distributes well. He's almost like he's like a really good point guard. That's the best way I can describe it. He's got good mobility, good flexibility to move around. More of a structured fit, but he works off time just fine. I think his NFL ceiling, to me, his ceiling is a guy like Matt Ryan. Maybe somewhere like between like a Joe Flacco or a Matt Ryan, somewhere in there. His floor, that's a different story. And I think if that's when you don't have a good idea of the floor, you do actually have to get somebody to back him up. Because Josh Dobbs made his way over to New England. Maybe you go back and get Cousins. That's another thing that we've discussed. A guy who knows the system there. And again, Kevin O'Connell, great coach, great start to his career. He won Coach of the Year last year for a reason. I'm interested to see what he would do with a guy like that, a Cam Scatterboo, if they went that direction. If they feel like I feel that running back is the biggest problem they have, and something that will take some pressure off whether or not it's the rookie quarterback, rookie starter, second-year player who's been in the system but he hasn't played, then that's interesting. And I'm very curious to see that play itself out. There's also some other running backs, like we mentioned a little while ago, that could also work their way into the conversation as a first-round talent. But I really like that pick for the Packers. Maybe they go Travion Henderson. That would, Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins would also be really good picks here. Cam Scatterboo, I say that he's listed lower. Like CBS's big board had him ranked at 133. I can't buy that for a second. But there's some good players in between there. Caleb Johnson is another one out of Iowa that I like. To me, the next best running backs are the two from Ohio State. Flip a coin. They're basically 86, 87. One way or the other, you're going to get a good running back if you take those two. The Vikings, you're going to go with Donovan Jackson, the guard out of Ohio State. It's interesting they go guard. Not interesting that they go Donovan Jackson. It's interesting they're going to take an offensive lineman and have Josh Simmons sitting there. I guess their situation doesn't require they go left tackle here, but I am surprised. And we have a trade update. Hold on, everything. This is interesting. The Raiders are trading the Texans are trading the pick to the New York Giants. Okay, folks, here we go. We're going live. We're going to go live on Instagram for this one. We're going to go back to everybody, so stay here. This could be Shedeur Sanders, folks. This is a trade back into the first round. The Giants are back into the first round. They're going to swap with the Houston Texans. Could this be Jackson Dart? Could this be Shedeur Sanders? This, to me, has to be a quarterback. There's no other reason why you trade back into the top 25 to get a pick here in the first round if you're not wanting to grab. And guess where they jump in front of? They jump in front of the only other team in the first round that we thought could reasonably grab a quarterback, and that's the Los Angeles Rams. So the Giants leapfrog the Rams. They get back in. I assume that means the Texans have traded out of the first round, and they're going to take the Giants' first pick in the second without having seen the return yet. This could be Shedeur Sanders. This could be Jackson Dart. It's a matter of what Brian Daboll and company, Joe Schoen, and everybody there in the Mara family has decided at quarterback. This is interesting, folks. This could be Jackson Dart. And if that's the case, I can see why Daboll would like Dart. What Jackson Dart brings is a full complement of throws he can make with that arm. Very dynamic offense under Lane Kiffin and company, as well as the great coaching staff they've had there offensively. They've had a who's who of guys there for the last couple of years, but Charlie Weiss Jr., the offensive coordinator, has really done a great job in revitalizing the Ole Miss passing attack. They've been able to really light teams up on the defensive side with what they've been able to do offensively. So Jackson Dart, a little bit more of your air raid style quarterback than even a guy like Shedeur. Shedeur is a little bit more accurate, I would say, in his processing of a defense and delivery of the football. But I think what Dart brings you is a more aggressive approach to the passing attack. Now, let's remember what they did just last season. They went ahead and grabbed the wide receiver that out of LSU, Malik Nabers, that we all raved about. And he had a great season in spite of the fact that at points in the year, he had Drew Lock throwing him the football. You really want to compliment a guy like that? Now, usually you don't put the horse before the cart before the horse. I've butchered that statement 2 or 3 times. The cart before the horse. But now you're in a position to get a quarterback. You have 2 on the roster that you think can hold the gap until this quarterback is ready to play. That is the positive of what they're doing. If that's in fact what they decide to do and draft a quarterback. Dart is more of a project to get ready for a pro-style NFL offense than Shedeur. I think maybe Dart's upside might be what's the ceiling for a ceiling for him is a guy like Matt Stafford, I think. I see Stafford as a pretty good comp. SEC quarterback, good arm. He's not a Josh Allen type that Brian Daboll had, and neither one of them is. I'll say that. I don't think either one of them's ceiling is Josh Allen. But this is wild, folks. We are live, and we are checking back in to see what, in fact, the Giants decide to do here. The Giants swapping picks there. The Texans will trade out of the first round. The Giants trade back in. We speculated earlier, guys. Cleveland, New York. One of those two teams was going to make the move to jump back into the first round. It turns out to be the New York Football Giants. Is it Dart? Is it Sanders? I mean, at this point, I had Dart at 21 to the Steelers. I had Sanders at 9 to the Saints. To me, the longer this goes, the more it makes me think the Giants are going to take Jackson Dart. Whether that's the right call or not, I think for the offense that the Giants want to run with Malik Nabers, he might be the more exciting option. I'm not saying the better option because there are, things that you're going to have to ready him up with the NFL game that he isn't seeing. But even then, it's a very dynamic offense he ran at Ole Miss. Very strong air raid concepts they have to it. And again, the Giants fans have been looking for an answer long term. Whoever this is going to be is going to get a chance to sit behind Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, two guys that have started for many years. So we'll see. Haven't yet seen the return on that trade, but this could easily be Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders. If it's not, I might fall out. I might fall out of the seat. I'm not even kidding. The pick is in. I said it a couple of times tonight. Baker to Dart isn't a bad comp. Hurts is probably a bit of a reach. I don't think he's as mobile or as flexible outside the pocket as Hurts. Here we go. We've said it a couple times tonight, the most anticipated pick of the night. Here it is. It's now the Giants. Do they take a quarterback at 25? They traded back up with the Texans to get it. They jump ahead of the Los Angeles Rams. Jackson Dart is the choice of the New York Football Giants. Okay. Well, there it is, folks. The historic fall of Shedeur Sanders is going to continue. The Rams are now on the clock, and Jackson Dart, the quarterback out of Ole Miss, is your 25th pick here in the first round. I had him at 21. I thought a team in this late in the first round would be in on Dart. They are. I did not have him ahead of Sanders. I didn't think scouts thought that highly of his pro readiness to put him ahead of Sanders. But in fact, they do. And now the Texans have. Now looky here, another trade up on the board. Hold on everything. The Rams are trading their pick. They're trading their pick to Atlanta. What in the world is this? Now, could this be Luther Burden? Oh, this could be Luther Burden. That pick is in. Okay, so the Rams no longer, if they were interested in the quarterback and he goes off the board in front of them, there's nothing they can do about that. Okay, so they decide to trade back with the Falcons. The Falcons have, an early second round pick there. This is interesting. I think this has to be wide out. If they're going to address, to me, this is a wide receiver or corner for the Falcons. Wide receiver or corner. If one of them is sitting there, this is interesting. Again, Dart from the pocket. He's got enough mobility that he can get himself out of problems. I don't think you're designing any runs for Jackson Dart, but I think he's got a good enough arm, good touch on the ball. Give Dart that credit. He does throw a clean ball. I don't think he throws as accurate a ball as Sanders, but I think Dart, third Ole Miss quarterback in first-round history, along with Archie and Eli Manning, so the first non-Manning to come out of the quarterback position at Ole Miss. And it speaks to the credit of what they've done there over the last several years with Lane Kiffin and company, Charlie Weiss Jr., John David Baker, quarterbacks coach there that's now over at East Carolina. They've done great work in the last couple of years to put themselves in there. And Jackson Dart was a highly sought-after college prospect when he came out of high school. Immediately goes under the learning tree of Lincoln Riley and then transfers over to Ole Miss. Thought he was going to be the next in the line of the Lincoln Riley QB projects, but instead goes to Kiffin at Ole Miss and winds up as a first-round pick of the New York Giants. So be interesting to see how that game translates to New York into what Brian Daboll and company wants to run. I'm not saying I think it's not the worst scheme fit. I think they definitely. Daboll claims, according to Sal Paolantonio, that he sees traits similar to what he saw in Josh Allen. Maybe with the thrower of the football, I don't see the athleticism and the size build being the same. I feel like, though, Dart is less of a project than Allen, so there is quality there. Allen was a bit of a project. Did Deion make a call to Atlanta and throw some threats in at him? No, I don't think he did. I don't think his poll is any bit as good there anymore. And that is a question that nobody really bothered to ask beyond the first 10 players, the first 10 picks, is how much does this Deion shadow loom large in a guy like Shedeur? Obviously, he had spoken at great length a year ago about how he's going to make sure his kid goes to the right location, even though that's really not in his, I think now it's definitely out of his control. At least to be a first-round quarterback. Now, if he wants to work a deal and say, hey, look, if my son's going to fall out of the first, let's try to get into a spot and maybe talk to some people and get in their ear and be like, well, let's get back in the early second round. I don't think it's the worst-case scenario for Shedeur, but money-wise, this is going to be a surprise for that family. I think they anticipated first-round money for him. I think a lot of people, as myself included. All right, Falcons come back in, and they take James Pierce Jr. Okay. I like this pick. James Pierce Jr. I had as the 19th player on my board. Edge rusher out of Tennessee. I had him behind Donovan Ezeraku, but not by much. So it's interesting to see the Falcons trade back in to get James Pierce Jr. because at this point, to me, he was falling. Now, the question I have is, did that mean that Baltimore was interested? That to me means Baltimore might have been interested, or even some of the teams below. Falcons received the 26th pick and a third rounder this draft. The Rams received the Falcons' second round, 7th round, and their 2026 first. Wow. To move back in to get James Pierce Jr., you're going to give up a 2026 first. That's interesting. Now, granted, it's a late first right now. Or it's a mid-round first right now on paper. But if the Falcons work their way into a playoff spot, that's not as bad a loss to give a late first if you like James Pierce Jr. as much as I do, which I really do. I think slender but quick off the edge. I think his immediate jump out to him. He's not as huge as some of the other guys as far as build is concerned, but the length on this guy is incredible. He's got good footwork as well. And you know what he does? He disrupts the offensive line a lot. He gets guys off their spot. And he's not just a down rusher. He can get after a quarterback outside the pocket. We see that more and more with guys, the way they want to stretch out a defense sideline to sideline. A guy off the edge that has the mobility and the speed to get there is certainly a bold choice and a good choice to make. So I like this pick for the Falcons. Little surprised they decided to trade back in for it, but I think they were surprised to see him still sitting there. And I think that means to me is they thought Baltimore or Washington was going to go ahead and get him. And if that's the case, the Falcons made a move, and I would imagine this is a move Raheem Morris is very excited to make. Pick 27, Baltimore on the clock. Feels like every year there's always a surprise storyline to this draft. Right now, it is definitely the drop of Shedeur Sanders. At one point discussed back months ago as the number one pick overall in the draft over Cam Ward. Now he may not even be a first-round pick. Because there's no way on earth Baltimore is taking a quarterback at 27. I can't see the Lions taking a quarterback at 28. I can't see, obviously, that none of the, and the rest of the four are the final four teams of last season. Short of a team draft. Now, again, we saw the Giants trade back in for Jackson Dart. Do we see the Browns take a spot from a guy like a team like the Chiefs or the team like the Bills and go ahead and grab a guy like Shedeur? Be interesting to see. Kevin Stefanski has had a good reputation as a QB mind, but granted, they're beholden to the roster they have and the massive contract they paid out to Deshaun Watson, and that has failed spectacularly. So they definitely need to figure some things out with regards to that. Who do I think the Lions take? I think they go corner. And if it were me, it would be Siobhan Revell, but I think it'll be Trey Amos or maybe even Nick Scourton, unless Scourton goes here at 27. I had Scourton going here at 27 to the Ravens. It wouldn't shock me if that holds steady. If it doesn't, I won't be shocked if the Lions grab. I would go corner if I'm the Lions, build out some depth in my secondary. To me, that's what I would do. I think they like Amos. I've seen him circulated in the names that I've already talked about and read about with regards to their scouting. Just after 11 o'clock here on the East Coast. Thank you all to everybody that stayed with us, stuck with us throughout all this. It's a long night of drafting. But we are getting through it here, and we are rounding out the first round here. It's interesting. The pick is in now for the Ravens. We'll see whether or not this is an picks in for the Ravens. The Lions sitting there in the wings. If, again, to my mock-up of what Siobhan Revell is, he is the perfect player for the Detroit Lions to take. He would be the perfect player to fit into that secondary. Do I think they'll do it? No. Should they do it? Yes. That's where I would go. Another player that's dropped on my board spectacularly is Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall. He could also work his way to Baltimore here. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I had him as a top 15 player on the board. As far as I had him a lot higher than some of these other edge rushers, but he has gone further and further down the board as some of these defensive linemen have come off. So here we go. The Ravens are up. And they are going to go with Malachi Starks, a name we almost forgot about. What a pick for the Baltimore Ravens. Do they know how to draft value better than most teams in the entire NFL? I have given this credit many a times to the folks in the Baltimore Ravens front office. Malachi Starks, I didn't even have this. Again, I had Malachi Starks as a top 10 player on my board. Best safety on the board, period. He's the only safety we've seen come off the board in the first round. He falls down the perspective boards of most people. Now, granted, I've seen him as low as like mid-20s. I did not have him falling to 27, but this is a brilliant pick. I feel like I'm always doing this when we've done discussions about the post-draft debrief, that the Ravens always seem to draft really well. Defensively, pair him up with Hamilton and the likes in that secondary, Marlon Humphrey. God, I love this pick for the Ravens. This is a brilliant pick. Can play him at slot corner if you need to. He stands out well as a set anywhere in this secondary you want to play him. Good ball skills, elite ball skills. Great player at Georgia. Covers the slot well. You can push him down, or you can move him back and play him in center field as a safety. More coverage safety than a hitter, but again, great skills for the ball, great eyes, great awareness. I love this pick for the Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens always seem to find these gems when they fall down the board, and they're getting the best ball play safety in this draft. The Lions pick is in, pick 28. Every year I feel like the Ravens do this better than most teams. And this information is available to all these different teams, but it always feels like the Ravens are just one step ahead of some of these teams. And that's why they're consistently picking near the bottom half of the first round. I know that's not what every Ravens fans wants to hear. They want to hear that they're going to win a Super Bowl, but golly, they have been consistent under John Harbaugh when it was Ozzie Newsome's staff, and the remnants of Ozzie Newsome's draft grading skills were always present, and they continue to be long after he's left the front office in his primary role there. But Ozzie learned amongst some of the greatest, like Scott Pioli and so many other great draft minds. So it's not surprising that this has continued in Baltimore for years to come. And this is, again, a case of teams misplacing. Starks, best safety in this draft. I've said it over and over and over and over again. I'll continue to say it. And he winds up in Baltimore. And in a division that's got Joe Burrow back there, and an AFC that's got Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, like we just mentioned, Burrow, CJ Stroud. I want the best secondary I can put together. Ozzie Newsome has built such a great front office in Baltimore, and they continue, and he's always served as an advisor even after he left. So brilliant job by the Ravens. Again, I've always felt like they do very well at this. They're not always the most aggressive team in free agency, but they do so well in the draft, and that's why they don't have to be. The Lions are in. To me, this has to be a corner. You lose Carlton Davis in the offseason to the Patriots. You want somebody to line up on the other side. I think safety is good right now. A big ball corner that can lock down on the other side of the field and really create problems. If I were the Lions, I'd take Siobhan Ravel. I really would. I understand the Kindry concern. I think that's ultimately what dropped him from being, there as a pick earlier in this first round. But I still think he's a first-round talent. I'm very curious to see where the Lions go here. This is a team, folks, that was just a couple injuries away from being able to be a Super Bowl contender again. A Super Bowl team. a participant in the game. They fell to the injuries. Washington played a phenomenal game. But make no doubt about it. If the Lions were playing the Eagles, that's a better matchup for the Lions than it was for the Commanders, even with the injuries. 7th in points allowed defensively last season per game. This is a stout unit. Different brain trust now that Aaron Glenn is gone, but it's still a really strong defensive core, and Dan Campbell and company have built that. And as I've explained to Lions fans all summer long, or all year long, all winter long, this is the problem with being successful. Your talent is going to be poached, and your coaching staff. That has happened to them on both sides this season, or this offseason. So, to me, this makes all the sense in the world to go cornerback here. Or, again, you could go wide receiver. Luther Burden's there. If it's not cornerback, I guess that's what you're going for at 28. Jameson Williams is kind of a head case in some of those cases right now, and you don't know whether he's going to stick around or not, or just write himself out of the NFL. The pick is in, and it's Tyleik Williams, defensive line or defensive tackle out of Ohio State. Okay. 6'2", 334 measurables on him. Byproduct of a really good defense at Ohio State. Big interior presence. It'll complement what they have. That's the best way I can put it. It'll complement what they have on the edge. I just don't know if this is where I would have gone at 28. But 7th ranked, one of the top 10 ranked defensive units, you want to go ahead and add to the defensive line, that's okay. I didn't have a first round grade on him. I didn't. But it's not to say, this again, once you get past 15, you can throw your hands up and go, these are guys you could possibly get in the second, depending on who's valued. Tyleik Williams is a prime example of a guy I thought you could get in the second round that clearly they thought different. And I don't hate it. I'm surprised that's where they chose to address first. Beat up defense needed a lot of help all around, but at the same time, maybe a reach on Williams. All right, moving along. We are now on the clock with the Washington Commanders. I had this projected out as Shamar Stewart. I'm going to flip that into Nick Scourton now because obviously Stewart has long left the board back with the Bengals at pick 17. I think my gut says it's Scourton, but they could also go corner here as well. Benjamin Morrison, maybe. Siobhan Revell. I don't think they need to go offensive skill position. They just added Deebo Samuel. So to me, this is a defensive player. I think it's an edge. Donovan Ezeraku. I've almost completely forgotten about it. Donovan Ezeraku, and this is unfortunate because this is apparently how the rest of the teams have looked at it. Donovan Ezeraku, edge rusher out of Boston College. Him or Nick Scourton. That's who I think this pick is. If not, I think the Eagles might take a grab at one of those guys. They might have been in a position to get Williams to try to fill the Milton Williams hole they just lost on their defensive line. But that's a stout unit either way. You add a guy like that to the equation. I think they add a corner and they're going to be in great shape to repeat next year if they're able to pull the squad back together the way they are. Just a few minutes shy of 11:30 here on the East Coast, as we've got 4 teams left to pick here in the first round, and that will conclude our coverage. And we'll be sure to give you our post-draft grades coming tomorrow for the first round. You can follow us on our social media accounts to check out where we grade out the teams. we will obviously won't debrief it here tonight as we are closing in on well past the witching hour of this Thursday night. The poor dog down there needs to go hang out, and we'll let everybody go back to their regularly scheduled programming once we wrap up the first round here. Seen some surprises. The Jaguars get Travis Hunter. We see Shedeur Sanders plummet down the board. We see Malachi Starks wind up in Baltimore. Jackson Dart as a Giant. Steelers neglect the quarterback position in the first round. They are looking at maybe now. None of these four teams here left have a need at quarterback. So this is where you have to get smart and start thinking about the second round, because these picks ultimately, I'm not saying they don't matter. They definitely matter. But it starts to become a discussion of second round. Where you start looking at for the second round. So the second round will look like this. The Browns have the 33rd and 36th pick. If Shedeur Sanders falls completely out of the first, which I think he will, you have to think the Browns are going to take him with one of those two picks. I would be stunned if he doesn't. Now, beyond that, then the Raiders at 37 are the best case scenario. The Saints at 40 could also be, but that would be a stretch to think Shedeur is at 40. But again, it was a stretch to think Shedeur wouldn't be a top 25 pick. I would be surprised if the Browns don't use one of their first two second-round picks on Shedeur. Mike Green is another player. We're shuffling the deck here on some of this depth chart options, but Mike Green out of Marshall could definitely feature back into this pick. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Nick Scourton or, Donovan Ezeraku. But the Browns hold two of the first five picks in the second round. They get Graham at 5. Complement what they have at Garrett. Here's the pick in for Washington. Josh Connerly, the offensive tackle out of Oregon. Okay. This was my next offensive tackle behind Josh Simmons. I had Simmons ahead of Connerly. So to me, this is a little bit of a surprise, but not much of one, because I had Connerly going early second round. I had Simmons sneaking in just early enough into round 1, and Connerly winding up in second. It's splitting hairs. They wind up with him at 29. I don't hate the pick. Protecting your quarterback. We could preach it all night long. You're going to protect that quarterback. This is a team that exceeded expectations exponentially last season. And that's all due in part to the development and the protection of Jaden Daniels. So now you go get him a 6'4", 311 offensive tackle. Left tackle in Oregon. It'll be interesting to see how well they utilize him out the gate, if they decide to move him around at all or they keep him at left tackle. I think he's a guy. He blocked the opposite side tackle for a guy like Dylan Gabriel, who's the quarterback at Oregon. So it begs the question, do you play him at right tackle? Or do you trust him with a right-handed quarterback's blind side? Now, maybe a little you're splitting hairs. I think you could play him on either side. I won't be shocked if the Commanders want to play him at right tackle, because they just got Laramie Tunsil in the offseason. So I think this is a great right tackle, and that would be a little bit early of a stretch as a left tackle, but right tackle, I'm fine with it. Laramie Tunsil is going to anchor down your left side. Josh Connerly goes over to the right side. I like the pick. Once you work it out like that, and that's how you have to take some of these things. You have to remember what they did just a month ago or so in the free agent offseason. So Connerly did fill that gap for Washington. So it's Buffalo, Kansas City, and Philadelphia to round out our first round right now, barring any trades. the more I talked myself into liking this pick a lot more, and it's because once you remember that Laramie Tunsil comes over in that deal, he leaves or he comes out, he leaves Houston and goes to Washington. And you have to like what Dan Quinn and company have done to build out around. They go ahead and get Laramie Tunsil. They go ahead and get Deebo Samuel. Now they use their first round pick on an offensive tackle in the late in the first, but still late first, early second round talent. Now the Buffalo Bills have an interesting decision here. I had this projected at cornerback. My first mock, I had it as Ravel. My final board, I had it as Benjamin Morrison. Trey Amos is still on the board. I had him to the Lions. This could be Trey Amos. This could be a number of guys here. I'm very interested to see where, in fact, they decide to go with this pick. It's interesting to see guys fall. And Will Johnson is still on the board, and Will Johnson was my number 2 corner. I just didn't anticipate him being on the board here. And I'm starting to wonder what somebody saw on his tape that they didn't like enough to see him fall from where he's supposed to be. Honestly, we've gone through so much, and I've had to kind of work on the fly here. I honestly forgot he hadn't been drafted. I forgot he was still on the board. So to me, if you're drafting it, you draft Will Johnson. Or you draft Siobhan Ravel and you take the calculated risk that I said it was, but he's still a phenomenal player. You won't find anybody in draft coverage that is bigger fan of what this guy brings to the table than I am about Siobhan Ravel. He had big time offers to leave East Carolina. He stuck it out there, played under that defense under Blake Harrell over the last couple seasons. That, he got to showcase what he was capable of doing, even in a non-Power 5 setting. Or Power 4 setting at this point. The point is, his ball skills, speed, and size make him, to me, the second best corner on the board. But I had put Johnson ahead just because I valued the concerns that teams are going to have about coming off the injury for Ravel. Someone's going to get a steal one way or the other, whether it's Johnson or Ravel, one or the other, they're going to get a huge steal. I think the Bills are in a spot to pick a corner, and I think the Eagles are. So we could see 2 go off the board here before the end of the first. Bills are on. Their pick is turned in. Behind them sit the Kansas City Chiefs. It gets harder and harder, to truly evaluate where some of these teams wind up being when they sit this far back in the draft every year. Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo, Philadelphia. You're getting first round talent in name. You're not always getting first round talent in quality or value. And I think one thing you have to consider is there are better pieces that they have to overcome as a first rounder, which does give you the option to go outside the realm here a little bit and be like, okay, let's take a chance on a guy. Let's go with a guy we can, don't have to start. It's not the end of the world if this guy doesn't start week 2, week 3. If he doesn't come into like 5 or 6, bring him in slowly. I think that's why a team like the Eagles or the Bills is a perfect location for a guy like Siobhan Ravel. Let's see who the Bills are going to go with here. It's like early election. This is like election returns. You just wait to see. Maxwell Hairston? Did I miss something? Maxwell Hairston above Johnson, Ravel, Amos, and Benjamin Moore. Wow. Again, we said at the beginning of the night, the draft is a big guessing game. And the Chiefs are trading their pick. Let's see where, in fact, the 31st pick is going. Is this a team moving ahead of Cleveland possibly? Nope, it's Philadelphia. They're moving. Is this a pick swap? Yeah, this has to be a pick swap between the Eagles and the Chiefs. The Eagles had the 30. Yep, okay. So 31 goes to the Eagles, 32 goes to the Chiefs. So my gut instinct says this isn't corner now for the Eagles. I have to admit, guys, I'm really kind of shocked at that. I had Hairston as, let's see here. My 5th cornerback on the board. Yeah, to me, this is a miss. And I'll be, you know what? I'll put a hand up and be wrong if I'm wrong about any of these players. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't hide behind being wrong. It happens, and this is, again, a great evaluation process, and these guys do it for a profession, and I'm here critiquing and commenting on it for my profession. And my professional opinion right now is I'm stunned that this is the direction they went at corner. A lot of people had him as the 3rd best. I had him at 5. I had him behind Morrison and Amos. I had him behind Ravel. Because, again, you really almost have to take Travis Hunter off the board. Yes, he's a corner, but he's a unicorn. He doesn't fit onto a pre-draft rankings of position players. That's the problem with a guy like him. So here we go. The Eagles pick is in. Maxwell Hairston. I wouldn't have done it. I think that's a stretch, but what I really want to know, and if I could talk to a scout or two, I would love to hear this. What exactly did they see on Will Johnson's tape that scared them this much off of him? Or more importantly, why weren't they considering Siobhan Ravel? If the Eagles get him here, to me, that's a steal, because the Eagles don't have – if he needs a little bit more time to work out the injury, fine, so be it. The Eagles' defense will survive, but it adds an entirely new layer to their defense if you can add a guy like that to a corner position. I mean, the defensive line and that secondary do a lot of work back there already. Fresh off a Super Bowl victory for the Philadelphia Eagles. Nick Sirianni and company here moving up with Kansas City, swapping picks. And it should be fair to note that a lot of my reflections tonight are more on the front offices than the actual players. Because, again, players are a byproduct of who's selecting them and when and where. You know, it's not about their individual talents, as we've seen with several players that have slid down the board. I have questions about the way of the evaluation process, because it's always a matter of, look, we're going to look back on this draft 10 years from now. There are going to be players in this first round that we're going to sit there and go, how could you do this? How could you do that? How could you look over here? How could you let this guy fall to the 2nd or 3rd round? That's the nature of what this is. But in the immediacy of the draft and the process that we go through each and every year to do this, there are topics that sit there and make you scratch your head. This would be one of them. I'm very curious to see where the Eagles go here. If they go corner, then they might have moved up because they think, I don't know. I think they might move up for Johnson. They might have moved up for Johnson. To see Johnson's plummet down the board might be enough of an inclination for them to go, all right, let's hop in front of you. teams in the second round, maybe like a guy like Tennessee or somebody like that that's going to have an early second. Again, we said it. The Browns have 2 in the first 5 of the second. The Texans are also going to need some help there. They're at 34. The Raiders at 37. The Bears have a couple picks, 39 and 41. So the second round is interesting, how it breaks out as far as picks go. Real quick, let's give a tally to the school with the most first-round picks. I believe it's Michigan, as we had set out at the outset of the night to say, because they have currently taken 2. It actually might be Texas now that I think about it. I have to double check it here. Actually, let's see. Georgia has 1, 2, 3 players. So right now, I think in fact, Georgia is in fact in the lead. Michigan, I had projected out of the night to have as many as 4. Right now, they have 2. The possibility of 2 still coming off the board here. But Texas had Matthew Golden go, as well as Kelvin Banks. So it's Ohio State having a couple players go off the board. They've had a couple surprising players move up on the board for them. Here's the final verdict. A 31st goes to the Eagles, 32nd goes to the Chiefs, and they get a 2025 fifth from Philadelphia. Well, there you go. Pick swap and a 5th amongst 2 teams that just met up in the Super Bowl. Let's see what the Eagles decide to do at 31. They traded up for it. Very curious. This Jihad Campbell. Okay. We've seen Jihad fall down the draft board a bit as well. I had Jihad as a top mid 15 to 20 player on the board. He falls. The Eagles, I think, saw that and they decided to go up for him. So I get it. I like this pick. They've obviously had some subtractions in the offseason defensively. Not a lot to shake a stick at Jihad Campbell out of Alabama. This is a guy we could have seen go as high as 15. So at 31, that's hard not to argue that that's a great pick. Jihad Campbell, multi-year starter at Alabama. Fits into a couple different defensive schemes. 6'2", 235. Can line him up inside, move him to the middle of the field, push him down off the edge if you want to. Great tackle ability. He wraps up offensive players in a bear hug and keeps them there. Good ball skills across the middle of the field. Again, what the Eagles want to do from their front of their defensive line is really create problems up there and let the middle of the field secondary guys take over and really wreak havoc. And this is a perfect player for that. Versatility is a strength. And in this Philadelphia defense, I can't help but think this is a huge get for them. So I like this pick a lot. We've sat here for almost 4 hours now. And where our mock ended up and where our scouting for this draft class went, the players that fell really took, some getting used to and some thought to be like, well, wait a minute. Why is this player falling? Like, why did Will Johnson fall? Why did Donovan Ezeraku? Why did Luther Burden? Some of these guys. Why did some of these guys jump up like Omarion Hampton? Why did Colston Loveland go higher than Tyler Warren? Why did Shamar Stewart, go that much further ahead of Nick Scourton? That's a part of this process that ultimately the people inside those NFL war rooms are the only ones that can ultimately make that decision. But the Chiefs pick is in, and once Jihad Campbell gets his time with the commissioner on the front of the stage here, we'll get a chance to see the final pick here of the first round. And our marathon draft show extravaganza will come to a close from everybody here at Moonlight Media Works. We appreciate you being a part of our night. We have had a ball taking you inside and around the draft. But with one pick left, we will wait and see the fate of the Kansas City Chiefs. They've turned the card in, and we shall see where they go with the 32nd pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. We've seen Shedeur Sanders fall out of the first round. That was a surprise. Jackson Dart climb his way all the way back up with the Giants at 25. Saw the Jaguars get very aggressive, move up to 2. Give the Browns an offer they couldn't refuse. To quote The Godfather, we made them an offer they couldn't refuse. To me, this seems like a pick for Josh Simmons, the tackle out of Ohio State. But the Chiefs have the luxury of being in this spot because they have depth, because they have the ability to make some different choices here. So it'd be interesting to see whether or not they wind up where they go here. Let's see where they go. Where Andy Reid and company, every button they've seen to push over the last couple of years, has worked themselves into the best team in the AFC. Let's see where they decide to go with the final pick here in the first round. So we close in on just under 4 hours for our draft show extravaganza. We want to say again, thank you so much to everybody that tuned in. It means the world to everybody here, myself included, myself primarily. The pick is in for the Kansas City Chiefs, and here is the selection from the commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell. Josh Simmons, there you go. One more win for the old mock draft board here for everybody at Moonlight Media Works and what we put together with this board. We had Josh Simmons going to the Chiefs. We had him at 31. He falls to 32 by the pick swap, and that's going to wrap it up. The first round of the NFL Draft is in the books. We thank you all so very much for being a part of our broadcast tonight, the second annual Moonlight Media Works Draft Show Extravaganza. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media. Stay tuned to all the great projects we have coming for you. It means the world to me to be able to do this and showcase this and be able to talk with people and really get to dive into some of these topics that we get a chance to explore. So thank you so very much for being a part of the broadcast tonight. That is the first round of the NFL Draft. That is our second annual Draft Show Extravaganza. Good night, everybody.